Hey there, tonight we're diving into the French Revolution of 1789, where cake wasn't on the menu and heads were quite literally rolling. Not the fairy tale, you know. But what you're about to discover might just have you rethinking Marie Antoinette's fashion sense. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. In the late 18th century, France was a land where bread was not just a staple of diet, but a symbol of survival, worth more than its weight in gold, quite literally, if inflation had its say. Picture this. The French economy was like a ship with a giant hole slowly sinking, while King Louis Roman XVI and his court were busy rearranging the deck chairs. It wasn't exactly Titanic-level romantic, but there were plenty of icebergs on the horizon. Let's start with the bread, because in France, bread is life. In 1789, the average French worker spent about 88% of their daily income just to buy bread. That's like spending almost your entire paycheck on avocado toast today and wondering why you can't afford rent. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a full-blown crisis. Bread prices had skyrocketed due to a series of poor harvests, and when your main source of sustenance becomes a luxury item, it's safe to say the social fabric is stretching thin. Meanwhile, Louis Roman XVI was at the helm of this economic disaster, steering the country with all the finesse of a toddler playing with a toy boat in a bathtub. His financial wizardry, or lack thereof, was legendary. Imagine someone trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, but instead just throwing it out the window. That's pretty much how Louis managed France's budget. The national debt was spiraling out of control, partly thanks to France's enthusiastic participation in the American Revolution. Yes, they helped the Americans win independence, but at the cost of their own financial stability. It's like buying your friend a new car while your own house is on fire. The French nobility and clergy, on the other hand, were living it up like rock stars of the 1780. They were the original influencers, flaunting their wealth in a way that would make even the Kardashians blush. The top 1%, who, by the way, didn't pay taxes, were living in opulent palaces, throwing lavish parties, while the rest of France was literally starving. The inequality was as glaring as a neon sign in a dark alley, and it was only a matter of time before something snapped. Speaking of snapping, let's not forget dear Marie Antoinette, who reportedly uttered the infamous line, "Let them eat cake," when told the peasants had no bread. Spoiler alert, she probably never said that. It's one of those historical myths that sounds too good or bad to be true, but has a certain irresistible appeal. The truth is, Marie was more out of touch than malicious, living in a world of silk and satin far removed from the gritty reality of her subjects. So, why did any of this matter? Well, when you have a nation where the majority can't afford basic needs, and the leadership is oblivious or indifferent, you're sitting on a powder keg. The French Revolution wasn't just a sudden burst of anger. It was the inevitable outcome of years of neglect, inequality, and incompetence. It was the ultimate cliffhanger that left everyone wondering what could possibly happen next, with the answer being, of course, quite a lot. In the grand theater of history, the French Revolution was the dramatic plot twist that nobody saw coming, except everyone did. Like any good soap opera, it had all the elements: betrayal, scandal, and a cast of characters who were larger than life. But at its heart, it was a story of ordinary people pushed to extraordinary actions by the crushing weight of their circumstances. And that is where our tale begins, in a land where the bread was scarce, the king was clueless, and the call for change was ringing louder than ever. So, as the curtain rises on 1789, France found itself at the edge of a political precipice, squinting into the abyss of change with all the enthusiasm of a cat confronted with a cucumber. The Estates General was about to convene for the first time since 1614, a gap longer than the time it takes for most of us to actually keep a New Year's resolution. This assembly was supposed to be the grand meeting of minds to save France's bacon, or at least its baguette. The Estates General was like a medieval reunion special with three main acts: the first estate, clergy; the second estate, nobility; and the Third Estate everyone else, which is to say, about 98% of France's population. This gathering was more dysfunctional than a Thanksgiving dinner where someone insists on discussing politics. The First and Second Estates were like the spoiled siblings who always got the best presents, while the Third Estate was the awkward cousin forced to sit at the kiddie table. Each of these estates had one vote, which sounds fair until you realize that the First and Second Estates had been practicing the buddy system since the Middle Ages. They'd vote together, leaving the Third Estate outnumbered and outmaneuvered like a single shoe in a pair. This setup was less a democratic process and more a rigged game of Monopoly, where the banker owns Boardwalk and Park Place before you even roll the dice. But the Third Estate wasn't just going to sit there and take it. They were ready to flip the board and change the rules. The first move came on June 17, 1789, when they boldly declared themselves the National Assembly. A statement so audacious was like declaring yourself the winner of a reality show before the first episode airs. Suddenly, France's political landscape was as unpredictable as a cat on a hot tin roof, and the other estates were left scrambling to figure out their next move. This wasn't just about political posturing. It was a seismic shift. The National Assembly was determined to draft a new constitution for France, something that would finally give the Third Estate a voice louder than a whisper. On June 20, 1789, they found themselves locked out of their usual meeting hall. Whether by accident or design remains a mystery, but it felt like being uninvited from a party you intended to crash. Undeterred, they marched over to a nearby indoor tennis court. No, they didn't start playing doubles. Instead, they took what's now known as the tennis court oath, vowing not to disband until they had a new constitution. This moment was more dramatic than any reality TV showdown, complete with tension, passion, and a bit of sweat. It was a bold declaration of intent, a promise of change that was as revolutionary as it was risky. The tennis court oath was like shouting into the void and hearing your echo come back with 1,000 voices, voices of change, voices of defiance. Meanwhile, King Louis Roman XVI was trying to figure out what to do with this political mutiny. His initial reaction was to send troops, which is the historical equivalent of trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Instead, he eventually conceded, ordering the clergy and nobility to join the National Assembly. This was more of a forced handshake than a genuine embrace, but it showed the power of the people, or at least the power of a large group of very determined people with nothing left to lose. The stage was set for a revolution that was about to get a lot more intense. The political tides were shifting, and the old regime was feeling the heat. The National Assembly was just getting started, and the world was watching with bated breath. What came next was a mix of triumphs and tragedies, a roller coaster of events that would change the course of history forever. As France teetered on the edge of revolution, the air was thick with the promise of change. It was a heady mix of fear and hope, a time when the future seemed uncertain but full of potential. The National Assembly was a beacon of possibility, a reminder that even the most entrenched systems could be challenged and perhaps overthrown. And so, the story of the French Revolution continued to unfold, with each chapter more gripping than the last. In this tale of upheaval and transformation, the National Assembly was not just a gathering of people. It was a symbol of a new era. It marked the beginning of a journey that would take France from the shadows of monarchy into the light of republic, though not without a good deal of blood, sweat, and tears along the way. Stay tuned, because the drama was just heating up, and the best, or worst, depending on your perspective, was yet to come. And so, as France stood on the brink of revolution, with the National Assembly flexing its newfound muscle, the plot thickened like a good pot of French onion soup. Enter the Bastille, a name that conjures images of towering walls, dark dungeons, and the kind of secrets that only the most dramatic of histories could contain. Spoiler alert, the reality was a tad less theatrical, but don't let that ruin the story. July 14, 1789 is when things got spicy. Remember, this was a time when news traveled slower than a snail on holiday, yet somehow, the idea of storming a fortress managed to catch fire. The Bastille was more than just a prison. It was a symbol of royal authority, a looming reminder of everything the monarchy stood for. But here's the kicker. By the time the revolutionaries decided to storm this bastion of oppression, it it was holding a grand total of 7 prisoners. Yes, you heard that right, 7. There were more guards than inmates, making it less a fortress of tyranny and more a historical airbun with questionable amenities. Yet, the French Revolution wasn't about to let facts get in the way of a good narrative. The siege of the Bastille was less a military coup and more a public relations masterstroke. The revolutionaries wanted gunpowder, and the Bastille had plenty of it. What it didn't have, however, was the fearsome reputation that history would later bestow upon it. The storming became the rallying cry for a movement, a potent cocktail of symbolism and spin that would make any modern PR firm proud. Now, let's talk about the mechanics of this iconic siege. Picture a crowd of around 1,000 Parisians, armed with the determination of 1,000 Davids facing their Goliath. The mood was electric, fueled by a mix of anger, desperation, and a touch of opportunistic looting. Because why not take a souvenir when you're making history? The governor of the Bastille, Bernard-René de Launay, had been expecting trouble. Still, like many in the old regime, he underestimated the sheer force of popular will. Talk about a career-limiting move. After a tense standoff that lasted several hours, de Launay, realizing the odds weren't exactly in his favor, decided to surrender. It was either that or face the wrath of an increasingly irate mob. And let's be honest, no one wants to be on the wrong side of history, or a pitchfork. The capture of the Bastille was swift, and its governor met a rather grim end, proving once again that revolutions don't come with a health plan. But why did the storming of this nearly empty fortress become such a pivotal moment in history? It wasn't about the prisoners, or even the gunpowder. It was about the symbolism, the idea that the people could rise up and tear down the very structures that oppressed them. The French Revolution wasn't just about changing rulers. It was about redefining power itself. Liberty, equality, fraternity. These weren't just slogans. They were the heartbeats of a nation on the brink of rebirth. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate the irony. A fortress known for its walls became a symbol of freedom precisely because those walls came tumbling down. The Bastille's fall was like a domino, setting off a chain reaction that would sweep across France and eventually the world. It was the ultimate poster child for revolution, all thanks to a bit of clever spin and the undeniable power of collective action. With the Bastille's fall, the revolution gained momentum like a snowball rolling downhill, picking up speed and size with every turn. The king, meanwhile, was having a bit of an existential crisis. Louis Roman XVI, upon hearing the news, reportedly asked, "Is it a revolt?" To which the response was, "No, sire, it is a revolution." If there were ever a moment that encapsulated the disconnect between the monarchy and the people, this was it. The storming of the Bastille was a turning point, not just in France, but in the annals of human history. It showed that the old order could be toppled, that change was possible even in the face of overwhelming odds. Yet, like all legends, the reality was a bit more nuanced. The Bastille wasn't the fortress of nightmares, and its capture wasn't the decisive military victory it was later portrayed to be. But as a symbol, it was unmatched, a testament to the power of perception and the enduring appeal of a good story. And so, the French Revolution marched on, fueled by the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. These concepts were as intoxicating as they were elusive, challenging to implement but impossible to ignore. The people of France had awakened, and there was no turning back. The Bastille may have been empty, but its legacy was full to the brim, a potent reminder that revolutions are as much about the stories we tell as the truths we uncover. As we leave the Bastille behind, the revolution is gathering steam, ready to sweep away the cobwebs of the past and usher in a new era. The path ahead is fraught with challenges, but the promise of a better tomorrow is worth the struggle. The French people have tasted the possibility of change, and they're not about to give it up, no matter how bumpy the road might get. The revolution is just getting started, and the best, or worst, depending on your perspective, is yet to come. Stay tuned, because we're about to dive deeper into the chaos and creativity that defined this tumultuous period. The revolutionaries have set their sights on a new France, and they're not letting anything or anyone stand in their way. It's a tale of ambition, courage, and more than a little madness, but one thing's for sure, it's history in the making, and it's not to be missed. As the revolutionaries set their sights on a new France, they soon discovered that liberty could be a rather sharp-edged sword. Welcome to the Reign of Terror, where the guillotine became the most talked-about accessory in Paris, and Maximilien Robespierre was its rather grim fashionista. Picture this. Between September 1793 and July 1794, about 17,000 people were officially executed, with tens of thousands more dying in prison or without a trial. That's like wiping out a small city or a particularly large music festival crowd in less than a year. And while the guillotine was efficient, swiftly separating heads from shoulders, it was the philosophy behind it that truly chilled the bone. Robespierre, the man of the hour, was a lawyer by trade and an idealist by nature. He envisioned a republic of virtue, where civic morality was paramount, and any dissent was a dangerous disease to be eradicated. The irony here is as thick as a Parisian fog. The revolution, which started as a quest for freedom, had morphed into a regime that valued conformity over liberty. Robespierre wielded power like a surgeon with a scalpel, but his surgery was more butchery than precision. The Committee of Public Safety, which sounds like a cozy neighborhood watch group, was anything but. Think of it more as the Grim Reaper's Board of Directors. Formed in April 1793, its members were the who's who of revolutionary zealots, and they took their role very seriously. Their mandate was to protect the revolution from its enemies, which, according to them, included anyone who didn't toe their increasingly narrow line. It was an era when suspicion could be as lethal as a dagger. A whisper of treason could land you on the wrong side of the blade, and paranoia spread faster than gossip at a royal court. The economic context wasn't helping matters. France was embroiled in wars on multiple fronts, and resources were stretched thinner than a Parisian crepe. The government instituted the law of the maximum to cap prices on essential goods, aiming to curb inflation and shortages. But like most well-intentioned economic policies, it didn't quite pan out as planned. Merchants hoarded goods, black markets flourished, and the average citizen found themselves grappling with scarcity yet again. The revolution that promised bread was now doling out breadcrumbs. Let's talk about the people who faced the guillotine. Contrary to the romanticized image of aristocrats meeting their maker with a quip and a wink, the blade was indiscriminate. Sure, some nobles lost their heads, but so did ordinary citizens. The revolutionary tribunal was less a court of justice and more a conveyor belt to the afterlife. Trials were often quick affairs, with defendants having little time to defend themselves. It was justice on speed, with all the fairness of a rigged carnival game. Among the most famous victims was Marie Antoinette, who was executed in October 1793. Her trial was a spectacle, full of sensational accusations, including incest with her son, a charge as baseless as it was salacious. The real crime, however, was political. Marie represented everything the revolution rejected: monarchy, privilege, and the high life. Her death was more about symbolism than justice, a bloody punctuation mark in the revolution's narrative. Despite the chaos, the revolutionaries were convinced they were on the right side of history. They believed that the terror was necessary to secure the revolution's gains. But as the bodies piled up, it became clear that the revolutionaries were, in many ways, their own worst enemies. They had turned their zeal into a self-destructive force, consuming not only their opponents, but eventually their own ranks. Robespierre himself would fall victim to the same razor-sharp justice he helped champion. By mid-1794, his influence was waning, and even his staunchest supporters began to question the wisdom of endless executions. On July 27, 1794, the National Convention turned against him. Robespierre was arrested, and in a delicious twist of irony, he faced the guillotine the very next day. His downfall was swift, as was the blade that ended his life, proving that revolutions often devour their children with remarkable efficiency. With Robespierre's death, the Reign of Terror came to an abrupt end, but the damage had been done. The revolution had shown that while ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were noble, the path to achieving them was fraught with peril and contradiction. The experiment in radical democracy had nearly collapsed under the weight of its own excesses. Yet, despite the bloodshed, the revolution had irreversibly altered the course of French history. The monarchy was gone, the old social order dismantled, and the seeds of a new political landscape had been sown. The challenge now was to nurture those seeds without repeating the mistakes of the past. As the dust began to settle, France was left to reckon with the legacy of its revolutionary fervor. The Reign of Terror had been a grim reminder of how quickly power could corrupt, and how ideals could be twisted into instruments of oppression. It was a time when the pursuit of utopia had unleashed a nightmare, and the lessons learned were as profound as they were painful. The French Revolution, like a sprawling epic, had its heroes and villains, its triumphs and tragedies. It was a story driven by human ambition and frailty, a testament to the complexity of change. And while the Reign of Terror was a particularly dark chapter, it was by no means the end of the tale. France was still on a journey, one that would continue to challenge, inspire, and confound in equal measure. As we leave the tumultuous days of the Reign of Terror behind, there's a sense of cautious optimism in the air. The revolutionaries have learned the hard way that liberty is a delicate balance, requiring vigilance and wisdom to sustain. The path ahead is uncertain, but the spirit of change remains undaunted. Stay tuned as the story unfolds, with new challenges and opportunities around every corner. The revolution may have reached a turning point, but its legacy is far from complete. But just as the dust seemed to settle from the Reign of Terror, buckle up, because here comes Napoleon Bonaparte riding in like the unexpected sequel to a summer blockbuster. If the French Revolution was an epic drama, Napoleon was the surprise twist that nobody saw coming, but everyone should have. Let's talk about how this Corsican dynamo turned the aftermath of a revolution into his personal playground. Napoleon wasn't just some military whiz kid, he was the ultimate opportunist. By 1799, France was exhausted from years of chaos, and its government, the Directory, was about as stable as a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Enter Napoleon, stage right, orchestrating a coup d'etat that was slicker than a magician's sleight of hand. On November 9, 1799, he declared himself First Consul, a title that sounds grandiose enough to be straight out of a sci-fi saga. He promised to stabilize France, and in a way, he did, by trading one kind of chaos for another, albeit with more strategy and less guillotine. Napoleon's economic policies were as bold as his ambitions. He introduced the Banque de France in 1800, giving the nation a centralized bank to stabilize the currency and curb inflation. Because, let's be honest, after years of financial misadventures, France needed a fiscal babysitter. He also set up the Napoleonic Code in 1804, which, unlike your average legal document, read more like a manifesto. It standardized laws across France, emphasizing property rights, equality before the law, and secular government. It was revolutionary in its own way, but like most things Napoleon touched, it came with a side of authoritarianism. Yet, for all his reforms, Napoleon was also the ultimate mythmaker. His propaganda machine was unmatched, spinning tales of his exploits that would make even the most seasoned PR firms blush. He turned military defeats into moral victories, and victories into legends. Remember the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. Sure, the British Navy handed him a stinging defeat, but Napoleon managed to keep the focus on land victories like Austerlitz, where his tactics were so effective they're still studied in military academies today. Talk about turning lemons into strategic lemonade. Now, let's zoom out a bit for the bigger picture. Napoleon crowned himself Emperor of the French in 1804, an act of self-promotion that would make any influencer jealous. It was a move that seemed to betray the very ideals of liberty and equality that the revolution had fought for. The irony was as thick as a Parisian fog. Here was a man who rose to power on the back of revolutionary ideals, only to install himself as a de facto monarch. It was as if the revolution had come full circle, trading one ruler for another, albeit with a different hat. But Napoleon's ambitions didn't stop at France's borders. His conquests stretched across Europe, earning him both admirers and enemies faster than you can say continental blockade. His military campaigns were epic in scale, involving millions of soldiers and reshaping the map of Europe more often than a kid with an etch-a-sketch. Yet, like Icarus flying too close to the sun, Napoleon's downfall came with his ill-fated invasion of Russia in 1812. His Grand Armée, initially 600,000 strong, was decimated by the Russian winter and logistical nightmares, with only about 27,000 soldiers returning. Napoleon learned the hard way that Mother Nature has a mean left hook. By 1814, The coalition forces were closing in, and Napoleon found himself exiled to the island of Elba, a Mediterranean timeout, if you will. But this wasn't the end of his story. In a move that only adds to his legendary status, Napoleon escaped Elba in 1815, returned to France, and regained power for a brief period known as the 100 Days. It was the historical equivalent of a surprise encore performance that nobody expected, but everyone was secretly thrilled to see. His final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo that same year, however, was the curtain call he couldn't avoid. Napoleon was exiled again, this time to the remote island of St. Helena, where he spent his final years plotting comebacks that would never happen. So, what's the takeaway from this whirlwind saga? Napoleon's reign was a complex tapestry of achievements and contradictions. He spread the ideals of the revolution across Europe, yet his rule often contradicted those very principles. His legacy is as multifaceted as a diamond, sparkling with both brilliance and the sharp edges of ambition gone awry. The French Revolution may have birthed ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, but Napoleon's era reminded everyone that those ideals could be co-opted in the name of power. Ultimately, the French Revolution remains the ultimate historical cliffhanger, not just because of its dramatic events, but because of the lessons it offers. It showed the world that change is possible even in the most entrenched systems, yet it also warned of the perils of unchecked ambition and the fragility of ideals. The revolution set the stage for modern democracy, yet it also highlighted the dangers of populism and the seductive allure of power. And so, as the echoes of the French Revolution continue to resonate through time, we're left with a story that's both cautionary tale and inspiration. It's a reminder that history is never a straight line, but a series of twists and turns, driven by the complexities of human nature. The revolution may have ended centuries ago, but its legacy lives on, challenging us to reflect on our own time and the values we hold dear. In the end, the French Revolution is more than just a chapter in a history book. It's a mirror reflecting the best and worst of what humanity can be. In a dusty corner of the ancient world, where olive trees outnumbered people and democracy was just a toddler learning to walk, there was Athens. Hardly the sprawling metropolis it would become, this little city-state was about as popular as a toga at a pool party. But oh, how quickly things can change. Fast forward a few decades, and Athens was strutting around like it owned the place. And in many ways, it did. Unlikely story of Athens' rise begins with a tale of survival against the odds, the Persian Wars. Picture a scrappy underdog facing off against the Persian Empire, which was more of a heavyweight champion with a taste for world domination. In 490 BCE, the Persians, under King Darius, decided it was high time to teach those pesky Greeks a lesson. They landed at Marathon with a force of around 25,000 men, ready to rumble. Meanwhile, the Athenians had mustered a mere 10,000 hoplites. If this were a boxing match, the odds would have been 3-1 against Athens. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of cowering in the corner, the Athenians pulled a fast one. They charged at the Persians, full tilt, covering the distance of a couple of football fields in full armor. The result? A shocking victory that left 400 Persians dead compared to just 192 Athenians. Not bad for a day's work, right? Marathon wasn't just a battle. It was the beginning of a legend. And like any good underdog story, it spread faster than gossip at a Spartan hair salon. But the Persians weren't the type to let a little setback ruin their day. 10 years later, in 480 BCE, King Xerxes I, son of Darius, decided to give it another go. This time, he brought an army so vast that ancient sources claimed it drank rivers dry. Herodotus, the ancient historian with a flair for the dramatic, estimated Xerxes' forces at over 2 million, though modern scholars suggest a more modest 100,000 to 300,000. Still, that's a lot of sandals clomping toward Greece. The Athenians, knowing they couldn't go it alone, did what any sensible city-state would do. They phoned a friend. Enter Themistocles, the Athenian leader with a strategic mind sharper than a Spartan spear. He convinced Athens to invest in a fleet of triremes, those sleek, three-tiered ships that could outmaneuver anything afloat. With these bad boys, Athens turned its eyes to the sea, where the real action was about to unfold. In the naval battle of Salamis, A few months after the famous last stand at Thermopylae, the Greeks proved they were more than just a land-based operation. Despite the Persian numbers, the Greek fleet of about 380 ships lured the Persians into the narrow straits of Salamis. The result? A maritime traffic jam of epic proportions and a decisive Greek victory. Xerxes, watching from a golden throne on a nearby hill, probably wished he'd stayed in bed that morning. Following these victories, Athens wasn't just a city anymore. It was a symbol. The Greeks, realizing that Persian invasions were like bad sequels, decided to take matters into their own hands. Thus was born the Delian League in 478 BCE, a coalition of city-states led by Athens with the noble goal of keeping the Persians at bay. Think of it as an ancient NATO, but with more togas and less bureaucracy. Initially, the Delian League was all about unity and mutual defense. Member states paid tribute into a common treasury, stored on the sacred island of Delos. But power dynamics are a tricky thing. Like a teenager with a shiny new smartphone, Athens soon began to wield its influence with increasing confidence, if not outright arrogance. The city started collecting allies like a kid collecting baseball cards, and those who dared to resist found themselves on the receiving end of Athenian persuasion. By the mid-5th century BCE, the Delian League had morphed into something much more Athenian-centric. The treasury, once safely tucked away on Delos, found a new home, Athens itself. This was less about convenience and more about control. You can almost imagine Athens saying, "Don't worry, we'll hold on to your money for you. What could possibly go wrong?" Under the leadership of Pericles, Athens flourished. This was the golden age, when the city was the envy of the world. The Parthenon rose on the Acropolis, a testament to Athena, wisdom, and Athenian awesomeness. But while Athens was busy building temples and hosting philosophical debates, it was also tightening its grip on the League, turning allies into subjects and tributes into taxes. In a twist worthy of a reality TV show, the Delian League had become the Athenian Empire. Athens had transformed from an obscure city-state into a powerhouse of culture and military might. But like any good story, there was more going on beneath the surface. For all its glory, the Athenian Empire was built on a foundation of tension and resentment. The same allies who had once rallied around Athens now grumbled about its heavy-handedness. So, how did this happen? How did a once-smartest polis become the head honcho of the Greek world? The answer lies in a blend of military prowess, strategic alliances, and a healthy dose of opportunism. The Persian threat had united the Greeks, but it was Athens that had emerged as the leader, a role it was more than happy to embrace. Yet, for all the triumphs and tributes, there was a cost, one that would eventually catch up with them in ways they never quite anticipated. Stay with us, because this is just the opening act. Athens may have been at the height of its powers, but the seeds of its decline were already being sown. The road from empire to ashes is paved with ambition, and the Athenians were about to find out just how slippery it could be. With Athens strutting into the spotlight of the ancient world, it was like watching a band go from playing local taverns to selling out arenas. This was the golden age, where democracy and drama mingled like old friends at a symposium, and Athens was the toast of the town, though not everyone was raising a glass in genuine cheer. Let's kick things off with the democratic experiment Athens was so keen on flaunting. Sure, democracy sounds great in theory. Everyone gets a voice, a vote, and maybe even a say in whether olives or grapes should dominate the agricultural landscape. But before you start picturing an idyllic utopia where everyone sings "Cumbere" in perfect harmony, let's peel back the layers. Athenian democracy was a bit like a high-stakes poker game with an exclusive guest list. If you were a male citizen over the age of 18, congratulations, you were in. Women, slaves, and foreigners, not so much. They were left on the sidelines, which might make you think twice about Athens' reputation as a beacon of equality. Despite its limitations, this democratic system was revolutionary. Citizens gathered at the Phoenix, a rocky hill with views of the city that were probably worth the climb, to discuss and vote on everything from war to public works. The assembly met 40 times a year, talk about dedication to civic duty. But with power comes responsibility, and the Athenians were nothing if not inventive in their governance. They had this nifty little tool called the Arstraken, a shard of pottery used to vote on who should be exiled. Imagine Survivor, but with pottery and a lot more at stake. Get enough votes, and you're out for 10 years. Talk about a harsh Yelp review. While democracy was bustling, the cultural scene was having its own renaissance. Theatres in Athens were the places to be, with playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides serving up drama that would put today's soap operas to shame. Audiences flocked to see tragedies and comedies unfold in the amphitheatres, where the only thing more dramatic than the plot twists was the actors' footwear. Those platform boots had more lift than an Olympic high jumper. But as the city basked in cultural glory, it was also busy building an economic empire on a foundation of silver and tribute. The silver mines of Laurium, located about 30 miles southeast of Athens, were the economic engine. Imagine miners working long hours, chipping away at the earth to extract silver, which was then minted into the drachmas that filled Athenian coffers. This silver wasn't just for show. It funded the impressive fleet of triremes that kept Athens' naval power afloat and paid for the marble monuments that lined the Acropolis. And then there was the tribute system, where Athens took on the role of a benevolent overlord, or at least that's how they pitched it. Member states of the Delian League, now essentially subjects of the Athenian Empire, paid tribute in the form of money or ships. It's not hard to picture Athens as an ancient mob boss, sending polite reminders that payment was due. This tribute system was lucrative indeed, but it didn't win many friends. Instead, it fostered resentment among the so-called allies, who probably felt more like cash cows than comrades in arms. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like Athens had it all. Pericles, the statesman with the charisma of a rock star and the political acumen of a chess grandmaster, was the face of this golden era. Under his leadership, Athens soared to new heights, its skyline dominated by the Parthenon, a temple so magnificent it still draws gasps today. The city became a magnet for thinkers and artists, the intellectual capital of the ancient world. Socrates, Plato, and other philosophical heavyweights pondered life's big questions in the agora, while sculptors and painters immortalized the human form in marble and paint. Yet, beneath the gilded exterior, cracks were starting to show. The cost of maintaining such an empire was steep, both financially and socially. The constant demand for tribute strained relationships, and the very democracy Athens championed was susceptible to the whims of demagogues. In a society where rhetoric was king, those with the gift of the gab could sway public opinion with alarming ease, sometimes for better, often for worse. As Athens strutted about, draped in glory and silver, it was easy to overlook the undercurrents of discontent. The city was a paradox, a place where freedom and oppression coexisted, where artistic achievement masked underlying tensions. It was a golden age, no doubt about it, but one built on a precarious foundation. The seeds of Athens' eventual decline had been sown in its very successes, and the road ahead promised to be as tumultuous as it was thrilling. In this heady mix of culture and commerce, democracy and dominance, there was a sense that anything was possible. But history has a way of humbling even the mightiest, and for Athens, the story was far from over. As the city continued to shine, the shadows lengthened, hinting at challenges to come that would test the mettle of this remarkable city-state. Stay tuned, because the tale of Athens is just getting started, and the ride promises to be as wild and unpredictable as the Aegean winds. As Athens basked in the afterglow of its golden age, the city was like a partygoer who had danced too close to the speakers, vibrating with energy, but missing the warning signs of an incoming headache. The Peloponnesian War, that epic 27-year tug-of-war with Sparta, was about to deliver one of history's most memorable hangovers. Athens, meet consequences. To set the scene, it's crucial to understand that, while Athens was busy flexing its cultural and naval muscles, Sparta was watching from the sidelines, unimpressed and itching for a showdown. Picture Sparta as the no-nonsense Jim coach to Athens' artsy theater kid. They both coexisted in the Greek world, but their values were as compatible as oil and water. While Athens celebrated democracy and intellectual pursuits, Sparta was all about discipline, military might, and a diet of austerity with a side of iron-fisted governance. The Peloponnesian War officially kicked off in 431 BCE, but the tensions had been simmering for years. The fuse was lit by a series of small conflicts and misunderstandings, the ancient equivalent of subtweets and passive-aggressive posturing. Corinth, a Spartan ally, had beef with Corcyra, an Athenian ally over what else? Shipping routes, a classic case of my triremes bigger than yours. Athens, showing off its protective instincts, stepped in to defend Corcyra, and just like that, the stage was set for a full-blown war. This war wasn't just about Athens versus Sparta. It was an inter-Greek family feud on an epic scale. City-states were picking sides like it was the world's most dysfunctional family reunion. On one side, the Delian League, now effectively the Athenian Empire, and on the other, the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta. Each side had its strengths, Athens with its mighty navy, Sparta with its invincible land forces. It was like a chess game where both players believed they had the better strategy, yet neither realized how high the stakes truly were. Enter Alcibiades, the Athenian leader who could have been pulled straight from an ancient soap opera. A charismatic and controversial figure, Alcibiades had a knack for turning everything he touched into political drama. Think of him as the original reality TV star, flamboyant, ambitious, and perpetually courting chaos. His ideas were as extravagant as his personality, and they often left Athens with more problems than solutions. One of Alcibiades' grand schemes was the ill-fated Sicilian expedition in 415 BCE, a military campaign that can best be described as a masterclass in how not to wage war. The plan: to conquer Sicily, an island roughly 800 miles away, and expand Athenian influence. It was ambitious, to say the least. Alcibiades pitched it as a surefire path to glory, but neglected to mention that it was also a logistical nightmare. Imagine trying to invade Florida from Maine with nothing but a fleet of canoes and a dream, an endeavor both desperate and doomed. The expedition ended in disaster. Athenian forces, numbering around 40,000 at their peak, were decimated. Tens of thousands never returned home, and the fleet, once the pride of Athens, lay in ruins. This was more than a military setback. It was a morale-crushing catastrophe that sent shockwaves through the city. Back home, the Athenians were left reeling and scrambling for damage control. Alcibiades, ever the slippery eel, had already defected to Sparta before the full extent of the calamity unfolded, proving once again that his loyalty was as fickle as a summer breeze. While Alcibiades played his own Game of Thrones, Athens was grappling with internal strife. The war had worn thin the patience of its citizens, who were now facing plagues, political corruption, and economic hardship. Remember the plague that hit Athens in 430 BCE? It was like the Grim Reaper had taken up permanent residence. The city lost around a quarter of its population, including its greatest leader, Pericles. Without his steady hand, Athens was like a ship adrift, captains squabbling over the wheel while the storm raged on. Despite these challenges, Athens wasn't about to roll over. The city still had a few tricks up its sleeve, and it leaned heavily on its navy. Naval battles became the name of the game, with both sides trading victories and defeats like they were playing an endless game of naval ping-pong. The Athenian fleet, rebuilt with a hefty price tag, was a testament to the city's resilience. But for all its maritime prowess, Athens couldn't quite land the knockout punch it desperately needed. As the war dragged on, Sparta found an unexpected ally in the form of Persia. Yes, the very same empire that Athens had once defeated now saw an opportunity to avenge its past losses. Persia provided Sparta with the financial backing to build a fleet capable of challenging Athens' naval supremacy. This was like handing your rival the keys to your prized sports car and hoping they don't crash it. Highly risky, with potential for major payoffs. The end game of this protracted conflict came at the Battle of Aegispotami in 405 BCE, where the Spartan fleet, led by Lysander, struck a decisive blow. Athens' fleet was caught off guard, and in a matter of hours, its naval power was shattered. The city, now vulnerable and blockaded by sea, was left to starve into submission. In 404 BCE, Athens finally surrendered, marking the end of its empire and the beginning of Spartan hegemony. Yet, even in defeat, Athens retained a spark of defiance. The city was stripped of its empire and forced to tear down its long walls, but its spirit remained unbroken. It was a humbling fall from grace, a lesson in hubris that resonated through the ages. The Peloponnesian War had been a clash of titans, a test of wills that left no victor unscathed. So, what do we make of this tumultuous chapter in history? On one hand, it's a cautionary tale of ambition unchecked and alliances unbound. On the other, it's a testament to the resilience of a city that, despite its flaws, endured and adapted. Athens may have lost its empire, but it found a new identity in the aftermath, a city not just of warriors and statesmen, but of philosophers and dreamers who would continue to shape the world long after the dust had settled. As the Athenian Empire crumbled, the world stage was set for new players and new stories. The end of one era is merely the beginning of another, and the next act in this grand historical drama promises to be just as riveting. But as we leave Athens licking its wounds, remember, in the annals of history, even the mightiest can fall, but true greatness is often measured by the ability to rise again. And rise Athens would, maybe not as an empire, but as a beacon of culture and wisdom that would illuminate the ages. The saga continues, and if history has taught us anything, it's that the past isn't just a series of events, but a living, breathing thing, full of lessons and legacies for those willing to listen. As Athens grappled with the aftermath of its empire's collapse, the city found itself in the midst of a classic Greek tragedy, complete with hubris, downfall, and a chorus of woes. The once mighty polis had been reduced to a shadow of its former self, licking its wounds while trying to make sense of the chaos that had ensued. But don't be too quick to pity them. The Athenians were nothing if not resourceful, and their story was far from over. Let's hit rewind for a moment and revisit the Sicilian expedition, that infamous military debacle that seemed like a good idea at the time. You know the kind, like buying a boat after a few too many drinks or attempting to cut your own hair. In 415 BCE, Athens decided it was high time to expand its influence westward, eyeing Sicily with the kind of ambition that could only come from a city confident in its own invincibility. Alcibiades, the charismatic yet controversial figure at the heart of this misadventure, convinced the Athenians that Sicily was ripe for the taking. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. With an army of roughly 25,000 troops and a fleet of 134 triremes, Athens set sail, hoping to secure glory and resources in one fell swoop. But here's where reality crashed the party. Sicily wasn't a pushover waiting to be conquered. It was a complex network of city-states, each with its own agenda and alliances. The Athenian forces found themselves mired in a quagmire of political intrigue and military resistance, reminiscent of an ancient Game of Thrones episode, minus the dragons and gratuitous violence. Back in Athens, things were hardly rosy. The political scene was as turbulent as the Aegean Sea during a storm, with demagogues vying for power in a game that often favored cunning over competence. The very democracy that had once been Athens' pride was now showing its Achilles heel. Political infighting, corruption, and the whims of an easily swayed populace made governance a Herculean task. Citizens, led by silver-tongued orators, could be as unpredictable as a Greek god with a grudge, and decision-making often felt like a roll of the dice. Meanwhile, the specter of plague loomed large over the city. The infamous plague of Athens, which first struck in 430 BCE, reared its ugly head again, decimating the population and leaving the living to grapple with loss and fear. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill flu. It was a full-blown public health crisis that claimed the lives of around 100,000 Athenians, including the esteemed Pericles. The disease spared neither rich nor poor, reminding everyone that nature, unlike politics, played no favorites. As if Athens didn't have enough on its plate, Sparta was proving to be a relentless adversary. Under the leadership of Lysander, the Spartans were determined to see Athens brought to its knees, and they had the patience and strategy to make it happen. With Persian gold lining their coffers, Sparta built a fleet capable of challenging Athens' naval supremacy, turning the tides in their favor. It was a bitter pill for Athens to swallow, watching their former foes now funding their downfall. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all the Athenians, who had once prided themselves on their independence and naval prowess. The final nail in the coffin came at the Battle of Aegispotami in 405 BCE. In what can only be described as a tactical blunder of epic proportions, the Athenian fleet was caught unprepared and annihilated by the Spartans. It was a crushing defeat that left Athens exposed and vulnerable, like a turtle without its shell. The blockade that followed strangled the city, cutting off vital supplies and forcing the once proud polis to its knees. In 404 BCE, as Athens capitulated and tore down its long walls, the city faced a reckoning. The empire had crumbled, the coffers were empty, and the glory days seemed irretrievably lost. Yet, amid the ruins, a flicker of resilience endured. Athens may have lost its empire, but it hadn't lost its identity. The city was still a beacon of culture, philosophy, and innovation, and its influence would continue to resonate long after its political power had waned. In the wake of defeat, Athens embarked on a journey of reinvention. The city-state that had once commanded an empire turned inward, focusing on the things that had always set it apart: art, philosophy, and the pursuit of knowledge. This wasn't about trying to reclaim lost glory. It was about finding new ways to thrive in a changed world. The Athenians, ever the pragmatists, knew that the pen could be mightier than the sword, or in their case, the stylus mightier than the spear. This period of introspection and cultural flourishing was spearheaded by the likes of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, whose contributions to philosophy and science would shape human thought for millennia. Athens became a hub of intellectual activity, a place where ideas flowed as freely as wine at a symposium. The city's agora, once the beating heart of its political life, transformed into a marketplace of ideas, where debates, discussions, and dialogues unfolded with the fervor of a Socratic seminar. Economically, Athens adapted to its new circumstances with characteristic ingenuity. The city's strategic location, coupled with its historical trade networks, allowed it to remain a vital center of commerce in the Aegean. The silver mines at Laurium, though less prolific than in their heyday, continued to provide a source of wealth, and the city's artisans and craftsmen found new markets for their goods. Athens may no longer have been the imperial overlord, but it was still a player in the grand game of trade and diplomacy. Yet, even as Athens found new ways to adapt and thrive, the scars of war and defeat lingered. The trauma of the Sicilian expedition and the Peloponnesian War had left an indelible mark on the city's psyche, a reminder that even the mightiest could fall. This newfound humility, however, was tempered by a quiet confidence in the enduring power of ideas and culture. After all, empires rise and fall, but the legacy of Athens would endure in the minds and hearts of those who came after. In this complex tapestry of triumphs and tragedies, Athens emerged as a city transformed. The empire had crumbled, the political landscape had shifted, and the challenges were daunting. But through it all, Athens remained a symbol of resilience and innovation, a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the indomitable spirit of a city determined to leave its mark on history. As we leave Athens at this pivotal moment in its journey, the story is far from over. The city's influence would continue to ripple through time, inspiring generations to come. In the next chapter of this grand historical saga, we'll explore how Athens, despite its setbacks, continue to shape the world in ways that still resonate today. Stay tuned, because the tale of Athens is far from finished, and the lessons of its rise and fall offer insights that are as relevant now as they were in the days of the Acropolis and the Agora. As we step into the final act of Athens' grand historical saga, let's take a moment to reflect on the lessons from its roller coaster ride through glory and ruin. The Athenian Empire was a bit like a firework, spectacular in its ascent, but inevitably destined for a dramatic descent. And while the empire itself fizzled out, the sparks it ignited continue to illuminate our world even today. So, what did Athens teach us about the art of empire building and the pitfalls of hubris? For starters, the Athenians proved that military might and cultural prowess make for strange bedfellows. Sure, it's tempting to think of Athens as a benevolent leader, spreading democracy and art like some ancient Oprah Winfrey. You get a vote. You get a tragedy. But reality was a tad more complicated. The Delian League, as we saw, was less a mutual defense pact and more Athens' personal fiefdom, where allies paid tribute with a smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. Athens' downfall is a testament to the perils of overreach. The Sicilian expedition, a strategic blunder if ever there was one, serves as a cautionary tale of ambition unchecked. It was a case of biting off more than they could chew, or in this case, trying to take a bite out of Sicily and choking on it. The expedition stretched Athens' resources thin, leaving it vulnerable to external threats and internal strife, a lesson in the dangers of spreading oneself too thin on the imperial buffet. Moreover, the Peloponnesian War highlighted the fragility of alliances. Athens might have been the life of the ancient Greek party, but it turns out that forcing your friends to foot the bill for your military exploits isn't the best way to maintain long-lasting friendships. The war revealed that the bonds tying the Greek city-states together were as brittle as a Spartan breadstick. When push came to shove, allegiance shifted faster than the sails on an Athenian trireme in a strong breeze. Yet, despite these military and political missteps, Athens' legacy is not one of failure, but of enduring influence. The city's true genius lay not in its ability to wield a sword, but in its mastery of the pen, and the play, for that matter. Athens gave us democracy, a concept that, while imperfect in its ancient form, set the stage for the egalitarian ideals we aspire to today. Yes, it was a democracy that excluded women, slaves, and foreigners, but it was a start, a revolutionary idea in a world where monarchs and tyrants ruled the roost. Culturally, Athens was a trailblazer, producing thinkers and artists whose works echo through the ages. The philosophical musings of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle laid the groundwork for Western thought, proving that sometimes the real battles are fought in the mind. These philosophical heavyweights wrestled with questions of ethics, politics, and existence, their debates as lively as a symposium fueled by ample wine and sharp wit. The arts were no less influential. Athenian drama, with its grand tragedies and biting comedies, explored the human condition in ways that still resonate. Playwrights like Sophocles and Aristophanes tackled themes of power, morality, and hubris with a deftness that rivals modern-day satirists. Their works remind us that, while empires may crumble, the stories they tell endure, offering insights into the timeless complexities of human nature. Economically, Athens demonstrated that innovation and adaptability are key to survival. Even as the empire faded, the city's strategic location and trade networks ensured continued prosperity. The Athenians' knack for commerce allowed them to remain a vital player in the Mediterranean long after their political dominance waned. They pivoted from imperial overlords to cultural ambassadors, trading goods and ideas with the wider world, a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. Let's not romanticize Athens' legacy without acknowledging its imperfections. The city was as much a product of its flaws as its virtues. Its democracy was exclusive, its empire oppressive, and its leaders not immune to corruption and demagoguery. Yet, it is precisely these imperfections that make Athens' story so compelling, a reminder that history is a tapestry woven from both triumph and tragedy. In the end, the fall of the Athenian Empire teaches us that power is fleeting, but the impact of ideas and culture can be eternal. While Athens lost its political clout, it gained a place in the pantheon of human achievement, its contributions to philosophy, art, and governance continuing to shape our world in ways both profound and enduring. As we close this chapter on Athens, let's carry forward its lessons and legacies. The city's rise and fall offer a mirror to our own aspirations and follies, urging us to question, innovate, and strive for a better tomorrow. Athens reminds us that while empires may rise and fall, the true measure of greatness lies not in conquest, but in the lasting influence of ideas that transcend time and space. So here's to Athens, a city that, despite its stumbles, dared to dream, and in doing so, left an indelible mark on history. In the sun-baked lands of northeastern Africa, where the modern-day countries of Ethiopia and Eritrea now lie, ancient history was busy cooking up something truly remarkable. Enter the kingdom of Axum, a civilization that didn't just write itself into the annals of history, but practically demanded a standing ovation. Let's set the scene. Axum was perched in a geographically enviable spot, like the prime seat at a sold-out concert. It was the crossroads of Africa, Arabia, and the wider Mediterranean world. This strategic location wasn't just a boon, it was a jackpot. The kingdom's fertile lands provided the perfect backdrop for a thriving society, while the Red Sea was their aquatic highway, bustling with trade routes that would make today's shipping magnates jealous. The kingdom's roots started to dig deep around the 1st century CE, though the region's history goes back even further. Picture a fertile highland surrounded by rugged mountains and arid lowlands, where early Axumites, likely descended from Semitic-speaking peoples who had crossed over from southern Arabia, found their Eden. The land was rich in resources. Gold, ivory, and exotic animals were all on the table, or should we say, the trading post. And while today we might think of coffee as Ethiopia's main export, back then it was all about incense and spices, the kind of stuff that made Roman emperors and Arabian merchants swoon. Speaking of trade, the Red Sea was no ordinary body of water. It was the ancient world's version of a superhighway, a bustling corridor where goods, ideas, and the occasional pirate ship zipped back and forth. The Red Sea's trade routes connected Axum not just to Arabian and Indian markets, but also to the far reaches of the Roman Empire. You can practically hear the clinking of coins and the bartering in the air. The Axumites knew they had a good thing going, and they had the organizational skills to prove it. They minted their own coins, which was no small feat. Coins weren't just currency, they were a statement of power and influence. If you could mint your own money, you were basically saying, yeah, we've arrived. The geographical advantages of Axum were undeniable. The kingdom sat atop the Ethiopian highlands, with altitudes that ranged from 500 to over 500 meters. That's like living on a skyscraper surrounded by skyscrapers, with an unbeatable view of the economic landscape. The climate was perfect for agriculture, with rich volcanic soils that made farming a rewarding endeavor. They grew everything from barley to wheat, and even had their own vineyards. Imagine that, sipping locally produced wine while overseeing a kingdom. Not too shabby. Now, Axum didn't rise to prominence in isolation. This was the ancient world, after all, where everybody had a hand in everybody else's business. The Axumites absorbed influences from neighboring civilizations like the Kushites and the Sabaeans of southern Arabia. The latter, in particular, left a notable mark. The Sabaeans were known for their sophisticated architecture and irrigation techniques, and it seems these ideas crossed the Red Sea along with merchants and goods. The Axumites were quick learners, adopting and adapting these innovations to suit their needs. This cultural exchange was the ancient version of a tech transfer, except instead of software patents, it was all about stone carving and water management. As Axum grew, so did its ambition. By the 3rd century, it was flexing its muscles, expanding its territory and influence. The civilization's reach extended into parts of what are now Sudan, Yemen, and even portions of the Arabian Peninsula. We're talking about a serious empire-building spree, with the kind of strategic savvy that would make modern political strategists nod in approval. But the real kicker, Axum wasn't just a land power, it was a seafaring force to be reckoned with. The Navy patrolled the Red Sea, ensuring those precious trade routes stayed open and under Axumite control. It was a classic case of, have boat, will dominate. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The region was a melting pot of cultures and competing interests, and Axum had to navigate the tricky waters of diplomacy and occasional conflict. They were up against other regional powers, like the Kingdom of Meroe to the west, and the ever-looming presence of Rome. But the Axumites were nothing if not resourceful. They played the game of ancient geopolitics with a deft hand, forging alliances and occasionally flexing military might when necessary. In the grand tapestry of history, Axum often gets overshadowed by the likes of Rome or Egypt. But make no mistake, this kingdom was a powerhouse in its own right. Its strategic location, fertile lands, and savvy engagement with the world economy set the stage for a society that would eventually leave a lasting legacy. And while the romantic notion of a mighty African kingdom ruling the trade routes is certainly appealing, the reality with its mix of economic shrewdness, strategic geography, and cultural exchange is even more intriguing. The Axumites knew how to work their advantages, and they did it with a flair that history buffs can't help but admire. And speaking of advantages, let's dive deeper into Axum's economic juggernaut, trade. Imagine the Axumites as the ancient world's savvy entrepreneurs, with their eyes firmly set on the horizon beyond the Red Sea. Their currency was the linchpin of this expansive trade network. Axumite coins, minted from gold and silver, were more than just money. They were ambassadors of Axum's influence, sporting inscriptions in Greek. Because, let's face it, Greek was the lingua franca of the time, and adorned with images of their rulers, these coins traveled far and wide. They were the ancient equivalent of a business card that screamed, "We're open for business, and we mean it." Now, let's chat about the commodities that fueled this economic engine. Ivory, gold, and incense were the big-ticket items, and they were as coveted as the latest tech gadgets are today. Ivory, gleaming and smooth, was the plastic of the ancient world. used for everything from art to tools. Gold needs no introduction. It's been the bling of choice since humans first dug it out of the ground. Incense, on the other hand, was the olfactory delight that sent priests and emperors alike into aromatic ecstasy. These commodities didn't just enrich Axum's coffers, they were the stuff of legends and the backbone of the kingdom's trade prowess. But how did Axum maintain these far-flung trade networks? Let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't just about having cool stuff to swap. The Axumites were masters of diplomacy and logistics. Their trade routes stretched from the Indian subcontinent to the bustling markets of the Roman Empire. Picture camel caravans snaking across the desert, laden with spices and textiles, crossing paths with Roman merchants eager to buy what the East had to offer. Axum was the intermediary, the bridge that connected the darts of this ancient global economy. And let's not forget the maritime aspect. Axum's navy was no ragtag fleet. These were seasoned sailors navigating the Red Sea with the precision of a modern GPS. They knew the monsoon winds like the back of their hand, timing their voyages to harness nature's power and avoid its wrath. This seafaring savvy ensured that Axum remained a key player in the Indian Ocean trade, linking African, Arabian, and Indian ports in a dance of commerce that would make today's supply chain managers green with envy. Economic acumen, however, wasn't just about moving goods. It was about fostering relationships, building trust, and sometimes flexing a little muscle when needed. The Axumites had a knack for forming alliances with local rulers and distant powers alike. They understood that trade wasn't merely a transactional affair. It was a complex web of human relationships. And when the going got tough, they weren't above using their military might to protect their interests. It was a shrewd mix of charm and force, a balancing act that kept the wheels of commerce turning. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the ivory tusk, in the room. The romantic notion of Axum as a benevolent trade superpower is enticing, yet it glosses over the harsher realities. Like any economic powerhouse, Axum's prosperity came with its share of exploitation and conflict. The demand for ivory and gold often meant harsh labor conditions and territorial disputes. And while the image of Axumite coins jingling across continents is alluring, let's not forget that currency often flowed into the hands of those who wielded power, not necessarily the everyday traders and laborers. In the grand chess game of ancient geopolitics, Axum played its pieces with remarkable skill. But this wasn't a game of chance. It was a calculated strategy. The kingdom's ability to adapt to changing trade dynamics, negotiate with foreign powers, and leverage its geographic position was nothing short of impressive. And yet, beneath the surface of this economic triumph lay the complexities of human ambition and the relentless drive for dominance. As we peel back the layers of Axum's trade empire, it's clear that this was a kingdom that understood the art of the deal long before it became a modern catchphrase. The Axumites didn't just participate in trade, they orchestrated it, ensuring their place in the annals of history. In the next part of our journey, we'll continue to unravel how this African powerhouse maintained its lofty status amidst the shifting sands of time. Stay tuned, because the story of Axum is far from over. And trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. So, as we saunter deeper into Axum's saga, let's turn the spotlight on the kingdom's political and social metamorphosis. Enter King Ezana, the monarch who wasn't just content with basking in the glow of economic success. Oh no, Ezana had grander visions. Think of him as the Steve Jobs of ancient Axum, except with slightly fewer turtlenecks and more crowns. Ezana took the reins around the early 4th century CE, and his leadership was pivotal in transforming Axum from a regional powerhouse into a formidable empire. Under his rule, the kingdom's territory stretched like a well-rolled map, covering modern-day Ethiopia, Eritrea, and even parts of Sudan. Now, this wasn't just some land grab. It was a strategic chess game with real estate stakes. Ezana knew that controlling these territories meant controlling trade routes and resources. And in the ancient world, that was akin to having the keys to the kingdom, or several kingdoms, really. But let's not get too carried away with the romantic notion of a benevolent ruler. Ezana was as much a diplomat as he was a conqueror. His military campaigns against the kingdom of Merere and the Bija people were not exactly Sunday picnics. These were calculated moves to eliminate rivals and secure Axum's dominance. It's the kind of political maneuvering that would make even Machiavelli nod in approval. Ezana's inscriptions, some of the earliest in Jair's script, brag about his military triumphs with the kind of swagger you'd expect from a general who just conquered half a continent. Yet, it's not just the battles and conquests that define Ezana's legacy. His embrace of Christianity marked a seismic shift in Axum's cultural and religious landscape. Around 330 CE, Ezana converted to Christianity, making Axum one of the first major empires to officially adopt the faith. This was no small feat, considering the kingdom's polytheistic roots. The traditional pantheon, with gods like Astar and Marum, suddenly found themselves out of a job. Talk about a divine downsizing. Ezana's conversion wasn't just a spiritual epiphany, it was a shrewd political move. By aligning with Christianity, he forged ties with the powerful Byzantine Empire, which also embraced the faith. This new religious alignment offered Axum a seat at the diplomatic table, strengthening its hand in international relations. It was like getting a VIP pass to the geopolitical nightclub, and Ezana knew how to work the room. The kingdom's newfound Christian identity also helped solidify internal cohesion, providing a unifying banner for the diverse peoples within its borders. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking this was all sunshine and hymns. The transition from polytheism to Christianity wasn't without its bumps. There likely were tensions, resistance, and a fair share of grumbling among those not ready to swap their local deities for a singular god. Yet, Ezana's deft handling of this transition ensured that the kingdom didn't fracture along religious lines. Instead, it emerged stronger, with Christianity becoming a cornerstone of Axumite identity. Ezana also understood the power of strategic marriages in maintaining stability and expanding influence. Through alliances forged in matrimony, Axum strengthened ties with neighboring tribes and kingdoms. These unions were less about romance and more about realpolitik. In the ancient world, a marriage was often the equivalent of a modern-day merger, complete with its own set of negotiations and settlements. Ezana's court was a hub of diplomatic activity, where marriages were brokered like high-stakes deals on Wall Street. Economically, the adoption of Christianity didn't slow Axum's momentum. If anything, it added another layer to its complex trade tapestry. The kingdom's Christian identity opened doors to new markets and partnerships within the Christian world, enhancing its trade network. The Axumites continued to be the middlemen of the ancient economy, facilitating the exchange of goods and ideas between distant lands. This wasn't just commerce, it was cultural exchange on a grand scale. Now, let's take a moment to debunk some myths. The image of Axum as a utopian Christian kingdom is tempting, but the reality was far more nuanced. Power struggles, social hierarchies, and the harsh realities of empire building were ever present. While Ezana's reign ushered in an era of prosperity and unity, it was built on the backs of those who toiled in the fields, mined gold, and navigated the dangerous trade routes. The kingdom's glory was inseparable from the grit of everyday life. Under Ezana, Axum reached its zenith, a beacon of power and faith in a tumultuous world. But like any great story, it's the complexities and contradictions that make it truly fascinating. The kingdom's blend of diplomacy, military might, religious transformation, and economic prowess created a legacy that still resonates today. Yet, as we look back, it's essential to remember that this tapestry was woven with threads of ambition, strategy, and yes, a bit of divine intervention. As we wrap up this chapter of Axum's narrative, remember that the kingdom's story doesn't end here. We've only just begun to explore the intricacies of one of history's most intriguing civilizations. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the threads of Axum's past, diving deeper into its enduring legacy and the forces that shaped its destiny. Because let's face it, history is never really finished. It's just waiting for the next page to turn. As we pivot from Axum's political and economic prowess, let's dive into the swirling whirlpool of myths and legends that cloak this kingdom in mystique. You see, Axum isn't just about trade routes and military might. It's also the stuff of epic tales that would make Hollywood scriptwriters salivate. Consider the grand legend of the Ark of the Covenant. Yes, that Ark, the one with the stone tablets and a starring role in more than a few Indiana Jones fantasies. According to Ethiopian tradition, this sacred chest resides in Axum, guarded in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. It's a claim that has tantalized explorers, theologians, and conspiracy theorists alike. But let's put on our skeptical caps for a moment. Historically speaking, the Ark's real whereabouts after the Babylonians sacked Jerusalem in 586 BCE remain as elusive as a cat in a thunderstorm. So how did this legendary artifact supposedly end up in Axum? Enter the Kebra Nagast, a 14th century Ethiopian text that spins a yarn more tangled than a soap opera plot. It claims that the Queen of Sheba, a figure already shrouded in enough mystery to make Sherlock Holmes sweat, bore a son with King Solomon. This lad, Menelik I, supposedly spirited the Ark away to Ethiopia. It's a tale with all the elements of a blockbuster: intrigue, romance, and a dash of divine intervention. Yet, for all its allure, the Kebra Nagast is more legend than ledger. There's scant historical evidence to back up these bold assertions, but that hasn't stopped the story from capturing imaginations worldwide. The allure lies in its epic scope and the tantalizing what-if factor. It's a narrative that cements Axum's spiritual significance, tying its fate to ancient Israel and positioning it as a beacon of divine favor. In a world where religious legitimacy was often as valuable as gold, claiming custody of the Ark was like holding a celestial passport to prestige. Now, let's not overlook the political utility of this tale. The Ark's supposed presence in Axum wasn't just about spiritual bragging rights. It was also a potent symbol of unity and identity for the Ethiopian people. By weaving this legend into the national narrative, Axum's rulers could bolster their claims to divine right and rally their subjects around a shared heritage. It's an age-old tactic. Use a splash of mythology to bind a diverse populace under one banner. It's like the ancient version of a national anthem, but with more stone tablets and fewer trumpets. While we're on the topic of legendary figures, let's not forget the Queen of Sheba herself. She's a character who straddles the line between history and myth with the grace of a tightrope walker. Her visit to King Solomon, as recounted in biblical, Quranic, and Ethiopian sources, is one of those stories that has more versions than a pop song remix. In Ethiopian tradition, it's hailed as Megdeh, a monarch whose encounter with Solomon led to the birth of a dynasty that claimed lineage from one of the wisest rulers in history. Talk about a pedigree. But here's where reality kicks the stool out from under the romantic narrative. The historical Queen of Sheba, if she existed at all, remains an enigma. Archaeological evidence suggests that a powerful kingdom flourished in southern Arabia, around modern-day Yemen, during the first millennium BCE. This Sabaean kingdom might be the real-world counterpart to Sheba, but pinning down specifics is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Even her storied visit to Jerusalem is more likely a symbolic tale, crafted to illustrate the wealth and wisdom of Solomon rather than record a factual state visit. Yet, the legend of the Queen of Sheba serves a purpose beyond mere storytelling. By associating Axum with such a storied figure, the kingdom could tap into a rich tapestry of cultural and religious narratives, enhancing its prestige. It's a classic case of branding before the age of Instagram influencers. The story of Megdeh and Solomon was a powerful tool for fostering a sense of continuity and legitimacy, linking Axum to the epic sagas of the ancient Near East. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate why these myths endure. In a world where literacy was a luxury and oral tradition reigned supreme, stories were more than mere entertainment. They were a way to convey values, reinforce social cohesion, and pass down knowledge across generations. The tales of the Ark and the Queen of Sheba were the ancient equivalent of a cultural adhesive, holding the diverse peoples of Axum together in a shared narrative. Of course, these legends also serve to elevate Axum's status on the global stage. By intertwining their history with biblical lore, the Axumites could engage in a form of soft diplomacy, forging connections with Judeo-Christian cultures. It was a strategic move that echoed through the corridors of power, opening doors that might otherwise remain shut. It's a bit like name-dropping at a party, except with prophets and monarchs instead of celebrities. As we sift through the sands of time, separating fact from fiction, it's tempting to dismiss these legends as mere flights of fancy. But that would overlook their enduring impact. For the people of Axum and their descendants, these stories were not just tales to be told around a fire. They were a vital part of the kingdom's identity, shaping how it saw itself and how it was perceived by others. So, while the Ark of the Covenant might remain hidden from prying eyes, and the Queen of Sheba may forever straddle the line between myth and history, their stories continue to resonate. They remind us that history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's also about the narratives we construct to make sense of the past. In the end, the myths of Axum are as much a part of its legacy as its trade routes and conquests. And as we continue our journey through this remarkable kingdom's history, we'll see how these legends helped shape its destiny, even as they left us with more questions than answers. Stay tuned as we navigate the next chapter of Axum's story, where we'll delve into the kingdom's enduring influence and the challenges it faced as it navigated the ever-changing tides of history. Because, in the grand tapestry of time, every legend has its place, and every myth its moment. And so, as the legends and myths continue to swirl around Axum like a historical fog machine set to 11, we find ourselves at the kingdom's twilight, a period as riveting as it is sobering. Axum's decline isn't the stuff of epic battles or dramatic betrayals. Instead, think of it as a slow fade, like the end credits of a long movie where the popcorn has long since gone stale. The reasons for this decline are as complex as a Rubik's Cube in a washing machine, involving environmental shifts, economic disruptions, and internal strife. First up, Mother Nature decided to throw a curveball that would make even the most seasoned Axumite farmer wince. Around the 7th century CE, climate changes began to rear their inconvenient heads. The once reliable monsoon rains that had transformed the Ethiopian highlands into a breadbasket started playing hard to get. As rainfall patterns shifted, agricultural productivity took a nosedive faster than a lead balloon. The fertile lands that had once fed a thriving population were now like an overworked Instagram filter, struggling to maintain the illusion of abundance. Of course, environmental woes weren't the only quagmire Axum found itself wading through. Into the shifting sands of trade routes, the lifeblood of Axum's economy. The rise of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula was a game-changer, and not just in a new kid on the block kind of way. As Arab traders began to dominate the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, Axum's maritime dominance faced a serious challenge. The economic center of gravity was shifting, and Axum found itself on the wrong side of the scale. Those lucrative trade routes that once flowed like a river of gold now resembled a dried-up creek, leaving the kingdom scrambling for economic relevance. And then there's the tale of internal strife, an age-old story as familiar as a soap opera plot twist. Political fragmentation within Axum became a pressing issue. As the kingdom's grip on its territories weakened, regional leaders started eyeing independence like it was a Black Friday deal. The central authority that had once held sway over a sprawling empire was now more like a polite suggestion. This disintegration of power didn't happen overnight, but it was as inevitable as an awkward family reunion. As Axum's star dimmed, one might be tempted to cue the sad violin music. But hold on, because the legacy of Axum is anything but a tragedy. Even as its political power waned, Axum left an indelible mark on the cultural and religious tapestry of Ethiopia. Christianity, which had taken root under King Ezana, continued to flourish, becoming a cornerstone of Ethiopian identity. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, a direct descendant of Axum's Christian legacy, remains a vibrant part of the nation's cultural fabric today. The architectural marvels of Axum, too, have stood the test of time. The towering stelae, those monumental obelisks that seem to defy gravity, are a testament to the kingdom's engineering prowess. These stone giants, some standing over 20 meters tall, continue to draw visitors and historians alike, eager to unlock the secrets of a bygone era. They're like the ancient world's version of skyscrapers, minus the elevators and overpriced coffee shops. But Axum's influence wasn't just confined to the stone and mortar of its monuments. Its legacy is woven into the very identity of Ethiopia. The concept of national unity, a theme that echoed through Axum's history, has persisted through the centuries. From the Zagwe dynasty to the modern Ethiopian state, the idea of a cohesive Ethiopian identity owes much to the precedents set by Axum. It's a legacy that has withstood invasions, colonial ambitions, and the vicissitudes of time. In the grand narrative of African history, Axum holds a unique position. It was a kingdom that defied the simplistic narratives often imposed on the continent's past. While too many historical accounts paint Africa as a backdrop for European exploits, Axum stands as a testament to African agency and ingenuity. This was a civilization that thrived on its own terms, crafting a narrative that was as much about trade and diplomacy as it was about cultural exchange and religious transformation. So why does the story of Axum still matter today? Well, for starters, it challenges us to rethink the way we view history. Axum wasn't some peripheral footnote in the annals of time. It was a dynamic player on the global stage. Its interactions with the Roman Empire, its embrace of Christianity, and its role in the trade networks of the ancient world remind us that Africa's history is rich with complexity and nuance. Moreover, Axum's story is a reminder of the resilience of human societies. Faced with environmental challenges, shifting economic tides, and political upheaval, the legacy of Axum endured. It adapted, transformed, and left an indelible mark on the region. It's a narrative that resonates in today's world, where change is the only constant, and resilience is more than just a buzzword. It's a survival strategy. As we close the book on Axum's chapter in history, let's not consign it to the dusty shelves of the past. Instead, let's keep its story alive, as a testament to the ingenuity and spirit of a kingdom that knew how to navigate the complexities of its time. Axum's tale is a reminder that history isn't just about the rise and fall of empires. It's about the enduring legacies they leave behind. In the end, the story of Axum is one of ambition, adaptation, and enduring influence. It's a narrative that continues to inspire, challenge, and inform our understanding of Africa's past and its place in the world. So, the next time you hear the whisper of ancient legends or the echo of distant trade routes, remember the kingdom of Axum, a beacon of history that, despite its decline, still shines brightly in the tapestry of time. Julius Caesar wasn't born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but rather with a slightly tarnished bronze one. The Julians, his family, were patricians, sure, but they weren't exactly rolling in the denarii. They had the pedigree of a purebred Roman horse, but lacked the oats to feed it. When young Julius came into this world on July 12, 100 BCE, Rome was a sprawling metropolis of chaos, ambition, and the occasional gladiator fight. Think of it as the ancient version of New York, but with more togas and fewer skyscrapers. Caesar's dad, Gaius Julius Caesar, creative naming wasn't their strong suit, was a governor in Asia Minor, which sounds fancy until you realize it was more like being the mayor of a mid-sized town with a lot of debt. And then there was his mom, Aurelia Carta, who was the real MVP in Caesar's life. With a knack for politics and a brain sharper than a gladius, Aurelia made sure her son knew how to navigate the treacherous waters of Roman society. Now, here's where things get interesting. At the tender age of 16, Julius's dad kicked the bucket. This left our young hero as the man of the house, thrust into the deep end of Roman politics. But rather than sink, Caesar decided to swim, and boy, did he swim like an Olympic champion. He aligned himself with the populist faction, the Populares, who were all about championing the common folk against the stuck-up, status quo-loving Optimates. It was a bold move, kind of like betting on the underdog in a gladiator match, but it set the stage for his future power plays. Around 75 BCE, in a classic case of wrong place, wrong time, Caesar got kidnapped by pirates while sailing the Aegean Sea. These weren't your charming, rum-swilling pirates of Hollywood fame. These were cutthroats who demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. That's about 620 kilograms of silver, or enough to make a whole lot of fancy cutlery. Instead of panicking, Caesar laughed in their faces and insisted they were undercharging. He demanded they ask for 50 talents, because if you're going to be ransomed, you might as well do it in style. Right. The pirates, amused and perhaps a little bewildered, took his advice and upped the ransom. Caesar, meanwhile, treated the whole ordeal like a bizarre vacation. He joked around, read them his poetry, and even exercised with them because apparently, even in captivity, leg day never skips itself. After 38 days, the ransom was paid and Caesar was released. But the story doesn't end there. True to his word, and Caesar was nothing if not a man of his word, he quickly raised a fleet, hunted down the pirates, and had them crucified. He did, however, mercifully slit their throats first, showing that even in vengeance, he had a touch of Roman civility. This little pirate incident showcased Caesar's flair for strategy and drama, foreshadowing his later exploits in Roman politics and military campaigns. It demonstrated his knack for turning potentially disastrous situations into triumphs, much like a master chess player who sees 5 moves ahead while everyone else is still figuring out the rules. Caesar's rise in Roman politics was nothing short of meteoric. He took on a series of increasingly important roles: quaestor, aedile, and then Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of the Roman state religion. Not bad for a guy who once had to negotiate with pirates. Each position gave him more influence and, crucially, more opportunities to rub elbows with the right people. In 60 BCE, Caesar, along with Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and Pompey, the great Rome's most celebrated general at the time, formed the first triumvirate. This unofficial alliance was like the Roman version of assembling the Avengers, only with more political scheming and less CGI. The power trio agreed to help each other rise to the top, an arrangement that worked surprisingly well for a few years, despite the fact that trust among them was as thin as a Roman toga. Caesar's early career was a testament to his strategic mind and his ability to charm, cajole, and when necessary, crucify his way to the top of the Roman ladder. His story is filled with lessons in leadership, ambition, and the occasional need to negotiate with scallywags. As we dive deeper into Caesar's life, we'll see how his early experiences, from his family's modest status to his infamous pirate encounter, shaped a man who would go on to become one of history's most iconic figures. But for now, let's just appreciate the audacity of a young Roman who turned a kidnapping into a career launchpad. Caesar's knack for turning life's lemons into a Roman-sized lemonade stand wasn't limited to pirate escapades. He soon pivoted to the next big thing: the Gallic Wars, a campaign that would make him a household name across the Roman Republic and beyond. You see, when Julius eyed Gaul, he didn't just see a bunch of tribes and cold weather. No, he saw opportunity, a chance to increase his wealth, power, and of course his reputation. Let's be honest, conquering Gaul was as much about the glory and the gold as it was about expanding Rome's borders. The Gallic Wars kicked off in 58 BCE and ran for a good 8 years. Now, this wasn't some quick weekend trip to the countryside. We're talking about a massive military endeavor. Caesar commanded legions, each consisting of roughly 800 soldiers. At his peak, he had around 10 legions under his control, so that's nearly 50,000 troops marching around Gaul. And they weren't just out there for a leisurely stroll. These soldiers covered vast distances, sometimes as much as 20 miles a day, on foot. Mind you, that's like walking a marathon daily while carrying armor and weapons. Not exactly your average Sunday hike. Now, let's talk numbers because, as they say, money makes the Roman world go round. Running a campaign as extensive as the Gallic Wars wasn't cheap. The cost of maintaining a single legion could run up to 1,000 talents a year. That's about 30 metric tons of silver, or, in modern terms, enough to buy a small fleet of luxury sports cars. Multiply that by 10 legions, and you start to see the kind of financial commitment we're talking about. But for Caesar, the payoff was worth every single sestertius. The spoils of war were immense, with wealth pouring into Rome from Gaul like wine at a Bacchus festival. He captured enough loot to fill the state treasury and still have plenty left over to fund his political ambitions. But let's not get too swept away by the romantic notion of noble conquest. Reality was far grimmer. Caesar's campaigns were brutal. The Gallic tribes were fierce opponents, and the conflicts were bloody, with hundreds of thousands of Gauls killed or enslaved. These weren't the sanitized battles of legend. They were gritty, gruesome affairs that left a permanent mark on the landscape. Caesar's own writings, the Commentarii de Bello Gallico, paint a picture of a strategic genius, but they conveniently gloss over the more unsavory aspects of the war. He was a master of propaganda, spinning his narrative to portray himself as the hero, the bringer of Roman civilization to the barbaric Gauls. It was the ancient equivalent of a blockbuster action movie, with Caesar as both the director and the star. Yet, behind the carefully crafted image, the reality was more Machiavellian. Caesar's true genius lay not just on the battlefield, but also in the realm of public perception. He wrote about his exploits in a way that glorified his achievements while downplaying his failures. Sound familiar? It's the kind of PR wizardry that today's spin doctors aspire to. His accounts were widely read back in Rome, where they stirred up admiration and support among the masses. Meanwhile, his political enemies seethed as they watched his star rise ever higher. Amidst the chaos and carnage, Caesar also demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt and learn from the people he was determined to conquer. He wasn't above borrowing tactics from the Gauls themselves, incorporating their cavalry techniques into his own strategies. It was a case of, if you can't beat M, join M, or at least learn from M. This flexibility was a key factor in his continued success, allowing him to outmaneuver opponents who underestimated him as just another Roman general. So, while the myth of Caesar as a noble conqueror is enticing, the truth is far more nuanced. He was a man of ambition, driven by a desire for power and glory, and not above using any means necessary to achieve his goals. His campaigns in Gaul were as much about personal advancement as they were about expanding the empire. But hey, it's hard to argue with results. By the time he returned to Rome, Caesar had not only solidified his reputation as one of history's great military minds, but also amassed the kind of wealth and influence that could make even the most jaded senator sit up and take notice. As we look back on Caesar's Gallic wars, it's clear that the line between legend and reality is as blurred as ever. The romantic image of the noble Roman conqueror is undeniably appealing. The harsh truth reveals a man who was as ruthless as he was brilliant. And while the myth may have endured for centuries, the reality of Caesar's cunning and ambition is a story that continues to fascinate, and perhaps offers a few lessons for those willing to see beyond the glory. But let's not wrap things up just yet. We've got plenty more ground to cover as we journey deeper into the life of Julius Caesar. Stay tuned, because the story's only just getting started. As Caesar returned to Rome, fresh from his Gallic escapades, and with enough loot to make a pirate blush, he wasn't just carrying treasure, he was hauling a hefty sack of ambition. The man was practically oozing power and glory, the kind that makes senators squirm in their togas. He knew he was a big deal, like a put your face on a coin kind of big deal, and he had every intention of cashing in on his newfound fame. But Rome wasn't just going to roll out the red carpet for him. Oh no, the political waters were as treacherous as a sea full of sharks, with a taste for patrician blood. First things first, let's talk about that little river called the Rubicon. You know, the one that Caesar crossed in 49 BCE, effectively declaring war on Rome itself. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Crossing the Rubicon wasn't just a daring dash across a stream. It was the ancient equivalent of dropping a mic, or more accurately, tossing a gladius into the Senate chambers and daring anyone to pick it up. The Rubicon wasn't just a river. It was a boundary that Roman generals were not supposed to cross with their armies. Doing so was a big no-no, a slap in the face to the Republic's rules, and Caesar's march across it was like saying, "Rules? What rules?" But why did Caesar take the plunge? It wasn't because he fancied the Italian countryside. No, it was all about realpolitik, the gritty, unsentimental kind of politics that makes the Game of Thrones look like a tea party. Caesar's enemies in the Senate, particularly the Optimates, were sharpening their knives, eager to cut him down to size. They feared his popularity and power, seeing him as a threat to the Republic's delicate balance. The Senate, led by the likes of Pompey the Great, once Caesar's ally, now his rival, demanded that Caesar disband his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. And if there's one thing Caesar wasn't about to do, it was walk into a lion's den without a legion at his back. So, with the words, Alia iacta est, the die is cast, Caesar made his fateful decision. The Rubicon was crossed, both literally and metaphorically, and there was no going back. This was no rash gamble, though. It was a calculated risk. Caesar knew his soldiers loved him, and he banked on that loyalty to carry him through the ensuing civil war. After all, you don't lead men through Gaul for nearly a decade without earning a few loyalty points. The civil war that followed was a whirlwind of battles and political machinations, with Caesar proving himself not just a masterful general, but a cunning politician. He didn't march straight to Rome like a bull in a china shop. Instead, he took a strategic tour through Italy, gathering support and consolidating power. Within 3 months, he had control over the Italian peninsula, leaving Pompey and his supporters in the dust as they fled to Greece to regroup. Caesar, ever the shrewd operator, seized the state treasury, because if you're going to wage a war, you better have the funds to back it up. But let's not glamorize this as some noble quest. The Civil War was brutal, a chaotic mess that tore the Republic asunder. Brothers fought brothers, and the streets of Rome ran red with the blood of political rivals. Caesar's path to power was paved with corpses, and his ascent wasn't some romantic rise to glory. It was a ruthless campaign of calculated moves and strategic brilliance, a bloody chess game played with real lives. Amidst the chaos, Caesar's propaganda machine churned out stories of his heroism and clemency. He portrayed himself as the savior of Rome, a beacon of stability in a world gone mad. It was a masterstroke of spin, the kind of PR genius that would make any modern politician envious. But behind the polished image was a man who knew that power was a precarious thing, something to be seized and held with an iron grip, and hold it he did. By 46 BCE, Caesar was back in Rome, basking in the glow of victory. The Senate, realizing which way the political wind was blowing, appointed him dictator. But this wasn't the kind of temporary dictatorship Rome was used to. No, Caesar was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. It was a title that screamed absolute power, and it caused more than a little unease among the old guard. After all, Rome had fought tooth and nail to rid itself of kings, and now here was a man with a crown in everything but name. Caesar's appointment as dictator was the culmination of years of strategic maneuvering and political savvy. He had played the long game, and he had played it well. But this wasn't just about personal ambition. Caesar saw himself as a reformer, a man with a vision for a new Rome. He enacted a series of sweeping reforms, from reorganizing the calendar to launching public works projects. He even expanded the Senate, adding his allies to dilute the power of his enemies. Yet, for all his successes, Caesar's rise was a double-edged sword. His absolute power made him a target, and his reforms, while popular with the masses, ruffled more than a few patrician feathers. The old republic was dying, and with it, the power of the Senate. Caesar's ascent had irrevocably changed the political landscape, sowing the seeds of resentment and fear among those who saw him as a tyrant in the making. In the end, Caesar's story is one of ambition and audacity, a tale of a man who dared to defy the odds and reshape the world in his image. His crossing of the Rubicon wasn't just a bold move. It was a declaration of intent, a statement that he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. But as history would soon show, even the mightiest of men are not invincible. The story of Julius Caesar is far from over, and the shadows of conspiracy and betrayal are already beginning to loom large on the horizon. So, stay with us as we journey deeper into the saga of Rome's most famous dictator, because the intrigue and drama are only just beginning to unfold. Yet, as the shadows of conspiracy started to lengthen around Julius Caesar, he was busy reworking the very fabric of Roman society. Sure, crossing the Rubicon had been a bold power move, but it was his reforms that really shook the Roman world to its core. Let's start with a little gem called the Julian calendar. Before you roll your eyes at the thought of calendars, remember this: the Romans weren't exactly punctual. Their old system was about as reliable as using a sundial in a thunderstorm. So Caesar decided to give time itself a makeover. Enter the Julian calendar in 46 BCE. The key innovation: a year with 365, 25 days, introducing the concept of a leap year. It was like the iPhone of calendars, revolutionary yet simple, but implementing it wasn't just a matter of flipping a few pages. To realign the seasons with the months, the year 46 BCE stretched to a whopping 445 days. That's right, the world's first supersized calendar year. This was Caesar's way of saying, "Hey Rome, let's get our act together." And it stuck around in one form or another until the Gregorian calendar took over in 1582. So next time you curse February for those extra days, tip your hat to Julius. But timekeeping wasn't Caesar's only trick. He had a knack for social policies that were as much about PR as they were about actual reform. Take his land reforms, for instance. Rome was bursting at the seams with landless veterans and urban poor. So Caesar divvied up land to these folks and settled them in colonies across the empire. On paper, it looked like he was playing Robin Hood, but it also conveniently planted loyal supporters in strategic locations. Clever, right? Then there were his citizenship grants. Caesar opened the gates of Roman citizenship to many in the provinces. It was a visionary move, expanding Rome's influence and integrating diverse cultures into the Roman fold. However, this wasn't just altruism wrapped in a toga. By giving these folks a stake in the empire, Caesar ensured their loyalty. It was a classic case of scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. Of course, not all reforms were met with fanfare. His attempts to curb corruption and streamline the government ruffled some very important feathers. Senators used to lining their pockets weren't thrilled about Caesar's crackdown on graft. He even reduced the number of grain handouts to the urban poor, aiming to cut costs and encourage self-sufficiency. Noble intentions, sure, but not exactly a crowd pleaser when you're dealing with thousands of hungry Romans. And let's not forget the economic reforms. Caesar reformed the tax system, reducing the burden on the provinces and curbing the rampant extortion by tax collectors. He also implemented a series of public works projects, creating jobs and revitalizing Rome's infrastructure. Think aqueducts, roads, and temples, like a new deal for the ancient world. This was Caesar in full-on statesman mode, trying to stabilize an empire that was constantly teetering on the edge of chaos. But here's where things get a bit murky. Were these reforms genuine attempts to improve Rome, or were they simply a way to cement Caesar's legacy? After all, nothing screams "look at my greatness" like reshaping society and leaving your mark on every corner of the empire. His reforms, while transformative, also served to consolidate his power, ensuring that his name would echo through the ages. And then there's the matter of Caesar's ego, which was about as modest as a triumphal arch. His desire for glory and recognition was no secret. The man wasn't just playing the Game of Thrones, he was rewriting the rules. His reforms were as much about building a lasting legacy as they were about solving the empire's problems. Every new road, every aqueduct, every law bore the indelible stamp of Caesar's ambition. The Senate, of course, saw the writing on the wall. Caesar's accumulation of power and his sweeping reforms were unsettling. They feared he was paving the path to monarchy, a fate Rome had fought to avoid since the days of the Tarquins. The title dictator for life was a chilling reminder of what Rome stood to lose, a republic built on shared governance, now overshadowed by one man's towering presence. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. While Caesar's reforms were reshaping the Roman world, they were also sowing seeds of discontent. The old guard, the Optimates, and even some of his own allies were growing increasingly uneasy. The balance of power was shifting, and not everyone was thrilled with the new order. Caesar's vision for Rome was bold, but it was also divisive. As we delve deeper into the story of Julius Caesar, it's clear that the man was a master of reinvention. His reforms were a blend of visionary leadership and calculated self-interest, a testament to both his brilliance and his ambition. But as the political tides shifted, the question loomed: could Caesar maintain his grip on power, or would the forces of tradition and jealousy conspire to bring him down? Stay tuned, because the drama is far from over, and the stakes are about to get even higher. As the political tides shifted, with Caesar's reforms sowing seeds of discontent, his grip on power was increasingly questioned. The senators, with daggers in their hearts metaphorically, and soon, literally, were like cats on a hot tin roof, skittish and ready to pounce. They feared Caesar was about to crown himself king, a title that would make him about as popular in Rome as a toga at a nudist colony. You see, Romans had a deep-seated aversion to monarchy, a political trauma dating back to their very first kings, who were about as welcome as a hangover at a wine tasting. Enter March 1544 BCE, infamously known as the Ides of March. It was on this day that the Senate decided to collectively stab their problems away, literally. Caesar, who had been warned by soothsayers and his wife alike, walked into the theater of Pompey, blissfully ignoring the ominous cloud hanging over his head. Maybe he thought himself invincible, a man blessed by the gods. Or maybe he just had a schedule to keep. Dictatorship doesn't exactly allow for personal days. The conspirators, led by Cassius and Brutus, were a motley crew of disgruntled senators and former allies, numbering around 60. They gathered around Caesar with all the subtlety of a pack of wolves. And then, in a frenzy of betrayal, they struck. Caesar was stabbed 23 times, a punctuation of violence that would echo through history. As the legend goes, his last words were "Et tu, brute," a line that Shakespeare would later immortalize, though historical sources beg to differ on its authenticity. It's more likely that Caesar met his end with the silent realization of betrayal, a gut punch far more painful than any dagger. The immediate aftermath was chaos wrapped in a toga. The Senate, thinking they'd restored the Republic, had effectively opened Pandora's box. Instead of a return to democracy, they got a front-row seat to a power struggle that would make a reality TV show look tame. The assassination triggered a series of civil wars that would see Rome tearing itself apart like a pack of rabid wolves fighting over the last scrap of meat. In the power vacuum left by Caesar's death, two main factions emerged: the forces of Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, and those of Gaius Octavius, known to history as Augustus, Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir. Antony and Octavian were like two scorpions in a bottle, each eager to sting the other while keeping their eyes on the ultimate prize, control of Rome. The first triumvirate was dead, but the second triumvirate rose from its ashes, formed by Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. But let's be honest, Lepidus was more of a third wheel than an equal partner. Their uneasy alliance was as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane, and it quickly degenerated into another round of civil wars. Amidst the backstabbing and battlefield maneuvers, the Roman Republic slowly morphed into an empire. Octavian, proving himself a shrewd operator, outmaneuvered Antony, leveraging both military might and political savvy. By 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Octavian's forces decisively defeated Antony and Cleopatra, marking the end of the civil wars and the dawn of a new era. Yet, for all the bloodshed and betrayal, the myth of Caesar only grew stronger. In death, he became larger than life, a figure around whom legends were spun like silk. He was deified by the Roman Senate, a celestial promotion that put him in the company of the gods, a fitting twist for a man whose ambition knew no bounds. Temples were built in his honor, and the month of Quintilis was renamed July in a nod to his legacy. Because what better way to be remembered than by hijacking the calendar? The romanticized image of Caesar as a noble reformer and tragic hero, crafted by the likes of Suetonius and Plutarch, captured the imagination of generations. But let's not sugarcoat it. The reality was far messier. Caesar's rise and fall were marked by ruthless ambition, political maneuvering, and a disregard for tradition that left Rome forever changed. In the grand tapestry of history, Caesar's assassination and the ensuing chaos were pivotal threads that redefined the Roman state. The Republic was gone, replaced by an empire that would endure for centuries, a testament to the enduring power of ambition and the fragility of human institutions. Caesar's story is a cautionary tale of power's intoxicating allure and the inevitable backlash it provokes. So, what do we take away from this epic saga? Perhaps it's the timeless lesson that power, once tasted, is hard to relinquish. Or maybe it's a reminder of the thin line between heroism and hubris, line that Caesar danced upon with all the grace of a gladiator in the arena. His legacy is both a tribute to his brilliance and a warning of the chaos that unchecked ambition can unleash. As the curtain falls on this chapter of history, we're left with the enduring image of Caesar, both as a man and a myth. A figure whose life and death continue to fascinate, offering insights into the nature of power, the complexities of leadership, and the eternal dance between ambition and consequence. So, next time you glance at a calendar, think of Julius Caesar, not just as a name in the annals of history, but as a reminder of the stories that shape our world, for better or worse. You're standing in the heart of 16th century England, where the Tudor dynasty is calling the shots, and things are as stable as a three-legged chair. The monarchs are living it up in opulent palaces, flaunting wealth like it's going out of style, and for all you know, it might just be. Enter the alchemists, the rock stars of the pseudo-scientific world, promising to solve two of life's biggest headaches: how to turn your pocket change into a fortune, and how to keep yourself from kicking the bucket forever. So, why did alchemy hold such a mystic allure back then? Well, if you were trying to survive in a time where financial security was about as common as a unicorn sighting, the idea of turning lead into gold sounded like an absolute dream. It wasn't just about wealth, though. There's something about immortality that has always tickled humanity's fancy. And in a time when the average lifespan barely hit 40, the idea of cheating death was more attractive than a free feast at the king's table. Take John Dee, for example, Queen Elizabeth I's advisor, who was knee-deep in alchemical pursuits. Dee was like the Elon Musk of his day, dabbling in everything from mathematics to astrology. He even coined the term British Empire. This guy was on fire. Dee wasn't just mucking about in his lab for the fun of it. He was chasing the philosopher's stone, the holy grail of alchemy that promised eternal life and endless riches. But let's hit pause on the legend and zoom in on the reality. Being an alchemist wasn't all secret elixirs and golden nuggets. First off, the materials weren't cheap. Mercury, sulfur, and other exotic ingredients weren't exactly lying around in your average Tudor backyard. Acquiring them cost a pretty penny, with some estimates suggesting that setting up even a modest alchemical lab could set you back by the equivalent of several months' worth of wages for a skilled craftsman. And then there was the small matter of societal expectations. The Tudors were going through economic mood swings like a teenager with a credit card. Henry Roman VIII had debased the currency so many times that the value of money was as unpredictable as English weather. Gold wasn't just gold, it was the lifeline of the economy. In this context, anyone claiming they could create it was either seen as a genius or a con artist, or both. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom. The social scene of an alchemist was positively electrifying. Picture this: clandestine meetings with fellow seekers of forbidden knowledge, sharing notes on the latest experiments, probably over some questionable Tudor ale. The alchemical community was a mix of genuine seekers and charlatans, with charlatans often doing better financially because, let's be real, nobody ever went broke promising the impossible. The cherry on top: many alchemists were funded by the very people they were trying to impress. Royals and nobles would bankroll these ambitious projects, hoping to fill their coffers with alchemical gold. It was a bit like investing in a startup with no product, just a charismatic founder who swore they were on the brink of a breakthrough. So, sure, alchemy was a tough gig. But when the alternative was a life of back-breaking labor or risking your neck in one of Henry Roman VIII wars, spending your days chasing the philosopher's stone didn't sound half bad. Plus, it was one of the few ways ordinary folk could rub shoulders with the elite, and who knows, maybe even change their fortunes. And if that meant spending all night trying not to blow up your lab, well, at least it beat being a serf. But before you start feeling too envious of these history's mad scientists, remember, their success rate was about as high as a Tudor peasant at a royal banquet. Spoiler alert, no one actually turned lead into gold, and the only immortality they achieved was the kind you get by having your name in the history books, often as a cautionary tale. Yet, the dream of alchemy lingered on. Because at the end of the day, who wouldn't want a bit of magic in their life, especially when the world around you was as unpredictable and harsh as Tudor England? Sure, alchemists might not have cracked the code to eternal life or infinite wealth, but they sure knew how to keep hope alive. And in an era where hope was often in short supply, that was worth its weight in gold, or at least in mercury. Speaking of keeping hope alive, let's dive into the gritty, day-to-day life of a Tudor alchemist, where dreams of gold and eternal youth met the harsh reality of grime, danger, and empty pockets. Alchemy wasn't just about waving a wand and chanting a few incantations. Nope, it was more like a medieval version of a kitchen nightmare, where the ingredients were as exotic as they were volatile. First up, the shopping list. If you thought your grocery bill was steep, imagine shelling out for mercury and sulfur. These weren't items you could casually pick up at the local market. Nope, you'd have to pull some serious strings to get your hands on these bad boys. Mercury, for instance, was as elusive as a royal pardon, and when you did find it, you'd be coughing up more than just a few shillings. In fact, some estimates suggest that procuring enough mercury for your experiments could set you back the equivalent of a year's wages for a skilled worker. And sulfur, well, let's just say it wasn't the kind of thing you'd want lying around the house. It stank worse than a Tudor street on a hot day, and one wrong move could turn your lab into the 16th century version of a fireworks display. But let's talk about the workspace itself. If you're picturing a gleaming laboratory with neatly labeled jars and the quiet hum of scientific progress, think again. The average alchemist's lab was less Hogwarts and more horror show. Imagine a dingy room, cluttered with alembics, crucibles, and retorts, none of which were known for their reliability. These instruments were prone to leaks, explosions, and the kind of malfunctions that could have you singing soprano for a week. The air would be thick with the acrid stench of burning chemicals, a cocktail potent enough to knock out a horse. Breathing in those fumes day in and day out, let's just say the quest for immortality didn't do much for your life expectancy. And speaking of life expectancy, let's not forget the ever-present risk of blowing yourself to kingdom come. Alchemy was a hazardous business, and not just because of the chemicals. The Tudor era wasn't exactly big on safety regulations, and insurance against lab explosions was about as common as dragons. A single spark could turn your alchemical dream into a very real nightmare, leaving you standing in the ashes of your ambitions, if you were lucky enough to be standing at all. Aside from the literal explosions, alchemists also faced metaphorical ones. Reputation was everything, and a spectacular failure could tarnish your name faster than you could say, "Fool's gold." The alchemical community was a small one, and news of a botched experiment traveled faster than a Tudor gossip. Fail too often, and you'd find yourself the subject of mockery, your credibility as shattered as your glassware. But let's not pretend it was all doom and gloom. There was a certain romantic appeal to the alchemist's life. The notion of unlocking the secrets of the universe, of holding the power to create gold and life itself, was intoxicating. People were willing to overlook the occasional fiery mishap for a chance at glory. It was a bit like being a rock star, dangerous, thrilling, and ultimately a little bit tragic. Economically, maintaining an alchemical lab was like trying to keep a sieve full of water. Even if you managed to get your hands on the necessary materials, the costs of maintaining them were astronomical. Many alchemists relied on patronage from the wealthy and powerful, who were eager to see their investments pay off in gold, quite literally. But these patrons could be as fickle as a Tudor monarch, and an alchemist's fortunes could rise and fall with the whims of their benefactors. Now, let's talk about the romanticized image of the alchemist's lab, a place of mystery and magic, where secrets were whispered and wonders wrought. In reality, it was a place of grime and grit, where the only wonders were the ones that didn't end in disaster. Despite the dangers and the costs, alchemists soldiered on, driven by the hope that one day they might unlock the secrets of the universe. The appeal of alchemy, with its promise of untold riches and eternal life, was undeniable. It was a beacon of hope in an uncertain world, where the line between success and failure was as thin as a piece of parchment. Alchemists were the dreamers of their age, willing to risk it all for a chance at glory. They may not have found the philosopher's stone, but they left a legacy of curiosity and ambition that still captivates us today. So, while the life of a Tudor alchemist might not have been all it was cracked up to be, it was certainly never dull. And in a time when the world was as unpredictable as a Tudor feast, that was a feat in itself. As we continue our journey through the world of alchemy, remember, the true magic wasn't in the gold they never made, but in the dreams they dared to dream. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover about these intrepid seekers of the impossible. And speaking of the dreams they dared to dream, let's dive into the political minefield that was the Tudor court, where alchemy wasn't just a pursuit. Oh no, it was a high-stakes game of thrones. Picture the scene. Monarchs perched on their thrones, eyeing alchemists like Elizabeth I scrutinizing her courtiers, all while hoping these proto-chemists could conjure gold from thin air. It's easy to see why a promise of endless treasure would make even the most skeptical royal perk up like a bloodhound catching a scent. Elizabeth, the virgin queen herself, wasn't immune to the allure of alchemical wonder. As with any savvy ruler, she knew that a healthy treasury was the key to maintaining power, funding wars, and throwing those lavish banquets that kept the nobility from entertaining treasonous ideas. Enter alchemists, with their tantalizing promises of gold aplenty, a prospect so tempting it could make even the most cautious ruler reach for their purse strings. Take the case of Edward Kelly, the infamous alchemist and associate of John Dee. Kelly was a man whose charm was only surpassed by his audacity. He caught the eye of Elizabeth's court with his claims of having discovered the philosopher's stone, a claim as bold as it was questionable. The promise of such a stone was like the Tudor equivalent of winning the lottery, and Kelly knew how to play his cards. He even managed to secure patronage in the court of Rudolph Roman II, the Holy Roman Emperor, who was equally besotted with the idea of unlimited wealth. But let's not pretend this was all sunshine and rainbows. Being a royal alchemist was like walking a tightrope over a pit of hungry crocodiles. The stakes were astronomical. Failure wasn't just frowned upon, it could cost you dearly. If you failed to deliver on your grand promises, you didn't just lose your job, you risked losing your head. The Tudors weren't known for their patience, and an alchemist who couldn't produce results was about as popular as a leper at a royal ball. The pressure to succeed was immense. and the consequences of failure were dire. The court was a place where rumors spread faster than the plague, and the slightest misstep could see you out of favor faster than you could say, lead into gold. If you think office politics today is brutal, imagine navigating a workplace where the penalty for underperformance was literal execution. And this brings us to a critical point. Alchemists often found themselves in a precarious position, caught between the rock of royal expectations and the hard place of scientific reality. The tantalizing promise of alchemy was always just out of reach, and failure was more common than success. It was a game rigged against them, yet one they couldn't resist playing. After all, the potential rewards were just too great to ignore. One particularly illuminating primary source is the correspondence of George Ripley, a renowned English alchemist who wrote extensively about the pressures alchemists faced. Ripley's writings reveal a man acutely aware of the dangers his profession entailed, and he warned fellow alchemists to tread carefully in their dealings with the powerful. The promise of gold could blind even the wisest of patrons. Ripley knew that an alchemist's life was a delicate balancing act. One false move, and it was game over. But why did monarchs like Elizabeth continue to invest in such a risky venture? Well, the economic context of the time provides some answers. Tudor England was a place where money was constantly on the move, sometimes in the wrong direction. Henry Roman VIII, Elizabeth's dad, had quite the penchant for spending, especially when it came to wars and personal extravagances. The crown was often in debt, and the idea of self-sustaining wealth through alchemy was as appealing as a get-out-of-debt-free card. Moreover, the political landscape was as volatile as gunpowder. England's rivals, Spain and France, loomed large, and maintaining a strong navy and army was crucial. Gold, or the promise of it, was the lifeline that could ensure England stayed afloat in turbulent waters. In this context, alchemists were seen not just as potential miracle workers, but as strategic assets in the game of international power. Of course, with great potential came great risk. The court was a shark tank, and alchemists had to navigate it with the cunning of a fox. Those who succeeded, like John Dee, managed to keep their heads, figuratively and literally, by being indispensable to their patrons. Dee was more than just an alchemist. He was a polymath who provided Elizabeth with astrological advice and navigational insights, ensuring his value wasn't tied solely to the elusive philosopher's stone. Yet, even with such precautions, the life of a court alchemist was never secure. The whims of a monarch could change with the wind, and an alchemist's fortunes could rise and fall with a single royal decree. It was a life where success was celebrated, but failure was not an option. The political ramifications of alchemical pursuits were profound, impacting not just the individuals involved, but the broader court and kingdom. As we continue to unravel the tapestry of alchemical history, it's clear that while the promises of alchemy were often out of reach, their impact was felt far and wide. The allure of alchemical gold was more than a dream. It was a reflection of the hopes and fears of an entire era. Monarchs and alchemists alike were caught in a dance of ambition and desperation, each step fraught with peril and possibility. So, stay tuned as we delve deeper into the world of these intrepid seekers of the impossible. The story of alchemy isn't just about the quest for gold and eternal life. It's about the human spirit's unending quest for knowledge, power, and a little bit of magic in a world that was anything but predictable. There's plenty more to uncover, so keep your alembics at the ready and your eyes on the prize. The alchemical journey is far from over. Alchemy, my friend, was the original cosmic lottery, and everyone wanted a ticket, even if the odds were about as favorable as finding a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. The crown jewel of this mystic treasure hunt was, of course, the philosopher's stone, not to be confused with anything J.K. Rowling dreamed up. This was the mythical substance that promised to turn base metals into gold and grant immortality. The holy grail of alchemy, if you will, but with more mercury and less divine intervention. Why was the philosopher's stone so beguiling, you ask? Well, consider Tudor England, a place where famines were frequent, and your life expectancy was about as reliable as a Tudor monarch's marriage vows. The allure of a magical panacea that could solve both your financial and existential crises was irresistible. Imagine, if you will, the equivalent of a 16th century Powerball, with the jackpot being eternal life and a bank account that that would make even the Medici envious. But here's the kicker. The Philosopher's Stone was as elusive as a shy ghost at a Halloween party. Despite the centuries of toil and countless alchemists vaporizing more coin than they ever transmuted, the stone remained firmly in the realm of myth. So, where did this legend come from, and why did it persist for so long? The roots of the Philosopher's Stone can be traced back to ancient texts from the likes of Zosimos of Panopolis in the Hellenistic period, who wrote about the transformation of substances. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, and you have alchemists like Albertus Magnus and Roger Bacon who were convinced they were on the brink of uncovering this secret. The idea was so intoxicating that even Sir Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics, dabbled in alchemy. Now, if Newton, with his apple-fueled genius, couldn't crack the code, it begs the question, was everyone barking up the wrong philosopher's tree? The truth, as historians have come to understand, is that alchemy was less about literal gold and more about the metaphorical transformation, the quest for knowledge and enlightenment. The Philosopher's Stone, in many ways, was a symbol of human potential and the pursuit of wisdom. Yet, the tantalizing promise of tangible riches kept the legend alive, even as evidence of its existence remained as thin as a Tudor dining etiquette guide. While they never did find that elusive stone, alchemists weren't just twiddling their thumbs and playing with fire. In their quest, they stumbled upon some pretty nifty discoveries that laid the groundwork for modern chemistry. Take, for instance, the work of Paracelsus, a Renaissance physician who advocated for the use of minerals in medicine and whose ideas contributed to the development of pharmacology. Alchemists like him were early pioneers in experimental methods, even if their lab notes read more like mystical poetry than scientific journals. One of the most notable advancements was the development of distillation techniques, which alchemists perfected in their quest for the elixir of life. This process would later become essential in the production of spirits. So, in a way, you have alchemy to thank for your Friday night gin and tonic. And let's not forget the discovery of acids and alkalis, which would eventually lead to the creation of the periodic table. Turns out, chasing fairy tales sometimes results in real-world treasures. But let's not get carried away with the romance of it all. The reality was that, for every alchemist making strides in science, there were dozens more blowing up their labs or duping patrons with elaborate hoaxes. The legend of the Philosopher's Stone endured not because it was real, but because it played into humanity's eternal hope for a miracle cure to life's woes. It was a beacon of aspiration in an uncertain world, and people clung to it like a lifeline. The economic realities of the time only fueled this obsession, with monarchs like Elizabeth regularly finding themselves in financial hot water, thanks in part to her father's penchant for expensive divorces and wars. A self-replenishing source of wealth was more than a dream. It was a political necessity. Alchemists offered that seductive promise, and in a world where the line between science and magic was blurrier than a poorly inked manuscript, it was an offer too tempting to refuse. So here we are, centuries later, still captivated by the stories of these proto-scientists and their mystical pursuits. The Philosopher's Stone remains a symbol not of failure, but of the enduring human spirit, our relentless quest to understand and master the universe, even if it means chasing shadows. Alchemists may not have turned lead into gold or uncovered the secret to eternal life, but they did set the stage for a scientific revolution that would eventually illuminate the mysteries of nature. As we continue to unpack this fascinating chapter of history, remember that the real magic of alchemy wasn't in the gold they never made, but in the doors they opened to the future. The Philosopher's Stone, in all its mythical grandeur, was less about the destination and more about the journey. A journey that, despite its many detours and dead ends, led to profound insights and advancements. Stay with us as we dive deeper into the world of alchemy, where hope and reality danced a complex and often combustible tango. There's plenty more to explore, from the secretive societies that guarded their alchemical knowledge like a Tudor guarding their last tankard of ale, to the impact these early experiments had on shaping the scientific landscape we know today. Keep your crucibles at the ready, because the alchemical adventure is far from over. So, as we delve deeper into the murky waters of alchemy's legacy, let's not lose sight of the fact that these alchemists, despite their often explosive failures, were like the early astronauts of science, Sure, they were aiming for the stars and sometimes ended up face down in a puddle, but their efforts were nothing short of groundbreaking. You see, the legacy of Tudor alchemists isn't just a cautionary tale about chasing fool's gold. It's a testament to human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge that set the stage for modern chemistry. Imagine this. You're in the 17th century, and the scientific revolution is about to kick off. Names like Boyle, Lavoisier, and Newton are starting to pop up, and they're armed with the tools and concepts that alchemists had been refining for centuries. Robert Boyle, often hailed as the father of modern chemistry, was quite literally standing on the shoulders of these mystical giants. He took the alchemical practices of distillation and experimentation and stripped away the mystical mumbo-jumbo, paving the way for a more empirical approach to science. It was Boyle who laid down the law, or more accurately, the gas laws. That would form the backbone of chemistry as we know it. And let's not forget the role of alchemical texts in preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations, acting like a medieval Wikipedia, albeit with more dragons and fewer citations. These texts were filled with cryptic symbols and allegories, often requiring a Rosetta Stone level of deciphering. Yet, they were an invaluable resource for those who came after, including the likes of Isaac Newton. Yes, our apple-loving physicist had a dusty collection of alchemical manuscripts tucked away in his library. While he was busy laying the groundwork for gravity, he was also dabbling in alchemical experiments, hoping to unlock the secrets of matter. Talk about multitasking. The alchemist's quest for the philosopher's stone may have been a wild goose chase, but it was a chase that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Their work introduced new substances, like phosphorus, which was discovered by the German alchemist Hennig Brand in 1669 while he was trying to create, wait for it, gold from urine. Yes, you heard that right. Sometimes the path to discovery is paved with questionable decisions, but phosphorus went on to become a key element in everything from fertilizers to fireworks. Now, fast forward to today, and alchemy still holds a certain allure, appearing in everything from Harry Potter to Full Metal Alchemist. It's the ultimate symbol of human ambition and folly, a reminder that our reach often exceeds our grasp. But isn't that what makes us human? The legends of alchemy continue to captivate us because they speak to a fundamental desire, the wish to transcend our limitations, to turn the mundane into the magnificent. It's a narrative as old as time itself, reimagined in countless ways. So, what can we learn from these historical misadventures? Well, if nothing else, the story of Tudor alchemists teaches us that the pursuit of knowledge is never a straight path. It's a winding road filled with dead ends and detours, where failure isn't just an option, it's practically a guarantee. Yet, it's in those very failures that we often find the seeds of progress. The alchemists, with their bubbling cauldrons and explosive experiments, remind us that the journey is as important as the destination. For modern-day dreamers, the legacy of alchemy is a call to embrace the unknown, to dare to dream big, even if the odds of success seem slimmer than a Tudor's patience. In an age where innovation is often born from risk-taking, the alchemist's spirit lives on in every entrepreneur, scientist, and thinker who steps into the unknown, armed with nothing but curiosity and a willingness to fail spectacularly. So, as you lay your head down and drift into dreams, remember the alchemists of old. They may not have found the philosopher's stone, but they discovered something perhaps even more precious: the relentless pursuit of knowledge, the courage to challenge the impossible, and the audacity to dream. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, there's a little alchemist in all of us, waiting to turn the lead of our daily grind into the gold of tomorrow's breakthroughs. Sweet dreams, and may your own alchemical adventures be just as thrilling and far less combustible. Your eyes flutter open to the gentle light creeping through the shoji screens, the paper-thin walls of your Edo period home. It's the start of another day in the life of a samurai, and contrary to Hollywood's glossy portrayals, you won't be leaping onto your noble steed to save a damsel in distress anytime soon. Nope, today is about as glamorous as a bowl of rice, and that's exactly what you'll be having for breakfast. Welcome to the world of the samurai, a domain where discipline doesn't just happen on the battlefield, but at the breakfast table too. Your morning meal isn't a lavish spread of delicacies. It's mostly rice, miso soup, and maybe a piece of pickled vegetable if you're lucky. Protein, Forget about it unless you've got the clout to snag some fish. The staple rice is more than a food item. It's a symbol of your duty and status. In a society where rice was currency, this humble grain also reminds you that your worth is often measured in bushels. As you savor, or perhaps tolerate, your simple breakfast, let's unravel the layers of what it truly means to be a samurai. First off, ditch the Hollywood glitz and glam. The romanticized notion of infallible warriors leading lives of honor and adventure doesn't quite match the reality. Sure, you're a warrior class member, but there's a lot more sitting around waiting for action than there is actual sword swinging. You're not just a fighter, you're also a bureaucrat, a land manager, and sometimes, like it or not, a glorified tax collector. Now, speaking of swords, yours isn't just a weapon, it's an extension of your very soul. However, the Bushido Code, the much-vaunted samurai code of conduct, isn't just about wielding a katana with grace. It's a strict set of rules governing everything from your bravery and loyalty to your politeness and frugality. It's like a medieval self-help book, but with higher stakes. Let's face it, dishonor doesn't just get you disinvited from the next tea ceremony. It can mean seppuku, a ritual suicide that's about as fun as it sounds. But let's debunk another myth. Samurai life isn't all about adhering to the Bushido Code. There's a hefty dose of economic and social pressure that comes with that armor. With the Tokugawa shogunate stabilizing Japan after years of civil war, the peace means fewer battles to fight and more time managing estates and dealing with the humdrum of day-to-day governance. You're not just a fighter. You're an economic entity, expected to manage your land and peasants efficiently. And if you don't have land, well, you're technically Ronin, a samurai without a master, which is about as glamorous as it sounds. More roaming beggar than wandering hero. The hierarchy is as rigid as your armor, with the shogun at the top and peasants at the bottom. As a samurai, you sit comfortably in the upper echelons, but it's a precarious spot. Samurai account for about 10% of the population, yet they are crucial in maintaining the social order. You're expected to lead by example, which is just a fancy way of saying that if you mess up, it's not just your reputation on the line, it's your whole family's honor. Remember those swords, they're not just for show. Carrying a katana and a wakizashi, a short sword, is your right and privilege, but it's also a constant reminder of your responsibilities. The katana represents your duty to your lord and country, and the wakizashi is a symbol of personal honor. It's like walking around with a resume and a liability waiver strapped to your waist. Let's talk finances. Sure, you're a samurai, but you're also a bit of a financial juggler. Your stipend, paid usually in rice, has to cover everything from your armor maintenance to your family's needs. In a world where rice is currency, a bad harvest doesn't just mean less sushi. It means your purchasing power plummets. You're expected to be a paragon of frugality, which can be a tall order when your lifestyle is supposed to reflect your status. The samurai class is like a tightrope act over a pit of economic uncertainty. Even as a member of the warrior elite, you're constantly navigating a landscape of political intrigue and financial instability. The Tokugawa shogunate's policies tightly control your life, dictating everything from where you live to what you can wear. It's like being in a medieval HOA, but with swords. Now that you're appropriately fueled and existentially pondered, it's time to step out into the world. As you slide open the shoji screen, you're greeted by the bustling world of Edo, a city that, by the 18th century, has become one of the largest in the world, with over 1 million residents. It's a chaotic tapestry of merchants, artisans, and other samurai, all navigating the intricate social web that ties this city together. So, what's on today's agenda? Perhaps a meeting with the daimyo, your feudal lord, who holds your fate in his hands. Or maybe a stroll through the bustling markets of Nihonbashi to ensure your household is stocked with necessities, assuming you've got the koku, a unit of rice currency, to spare. Either way, every interaction is governed by a strict code of etiquette, where each bow, each word holds weight. As you walk the streets, you can't help but notice the stark contrast between your life and those of the common folk. While your status provides certain privileges, it also isolates you. You're not just a person, you're a symbol, a living representation of the ideals of honor, duty, and loyalty. It's a lot to carry, and that armor isn't getting any lighter. Before you head for your duties, let's take a moment to talk about the myth of the lone warrior. The reality is, as a samurai, you're never really alone. Whether it's the retainers that assist in your duties or the family that relies on your standing, your life is deeply intertwined with a web of relationships and obligations. The lone samurai wandering the countryside is mostly a romantic notion, and while it makes for a great story, it's far from practical. In this world, the Bushido code you follow isn't just a set of rules. It's a lifeline in a society built on strict hierarchies and expectations. It's a guiding light, but it's also a heavy burden. Honor is your currency, and while it doesn't pay the bills, it can cost you everything. As you ponder these thoughts, the sun climbs higher in the sky, signaling the start of a new chapter in this day in Edo, Japan. And remember, whether you're dealing with bureaucratic tasks or contemplating the meaning of honor, the life of a samurai is as much about surviving the mundane as it is about thriving in the extraordinary. With the sun now blazing at its zenith, you step into Edo's bustling thoroughfares, where the real action unfolds, not the swashbuckling kind, but a different sort of intrigue altogether. Welcome to Edo, not just a city, but a living, breathing organism of over 1 million souls, making it one of the most populous cities in the world. Yes, even back then, the Japanese knew how to cram folks into tight spaces, a talent that would make even Manhattanites nod in respect. As a samurai in Edo, you're not just a warrior. You're a cog in the great machine of the Tokugawa shogunate, the ultimate governing body that keeps Japan ticking like a finely tuned clock. Your role as a city official means you're less about swinging swords and more about wielding influence, managing affairs, and ensuring the city's smooth operation. It's like being a knight crossed with a bureaucrat, Sir Lancelot meets Dilbert. You're paid for your service with a stipend, often in rice, the grain that fuels both bellies and economies. For perspective, a single koku, roughly 180 liters of rice, was meant to feed one person for a year, but your stipend is more like a financial straitjacket. You've got to balance the books with the precision of a sushi chef slicing sashimi. Don't be fooled by the romantic notion of samurai luxuriating in wealth. Many of your peers are as tight-fisted as a miser in a coin factory, because they have to be. To make ends meet, side hustles are not just common, they're essential. You're likely involved in something beyond your official duties, maybe overseeing a dojo, teaching calligraphy, or even dabbling in the arts. Some samurai, believe it or not, become poets or musicians, swapping swords for shamisen, the traditional Japanese lute. Others might try their hand at commerce, though that's technically beneath your station. But hey, when the rice buckets are running low, principles can be as negotiable as a marketplace haggle. Edo's political landscape is as complex as a Zen koan. The Tokugawa shogunate, led by the shogun, is the power behind the throne, ruling in the emperor's name from Edo Castle. You're part of this elaborate chess game, where loyalty is both a currency and a weapon. The shogunate's expectations are clear: obedience, efficiency, and above all, loyalty. Break ranks, and you're out faster than you can say katana. But let's not sugarcoat it. The price of disloyalty isn't just a stern talking to, it's more likely to involve a sharp blade and a lot of bowing. The stakes are high, and the consequences of betrayal can be as swift and final as a cherry blossom falling from its tree. Yet, the system works, keeping Japan in a state of peace known as the Pax Tokugawa for over 2 centuries. It's not a bad gig if you can keep your head, literally. As you stroll through Nihonbashi, Edo's commercial hub, the air is thick with the scent of market wares, and the clamor of hawkers peddling everything from fine silks to the latest haikus. The economy here is a vibrant tapestry, woven from the threads of commerce and culture. It's a place where samurai rub shoulders with merchants, artisans, and peasants, a melting pot of society under the strict eye of the shogunate. Your role as a city official often involves mediating disputes, overseeing construction projects, or ensuring that taxes are collected. And let's be real, it's not all tea ceremonies and poetry readings. Sometimes, it's about as glamorous as counting grains of rice. But hey, someone's got to do it. Your tasks are varied, but they ultimately serve a single purpose: to maintain the social order and uphold the status quo. The shogunate's policy of sakoku, or national isolation, has created a unique microcosm where everything needed is produced locally and foreign influence is kept at bay. And speaking of maintaining order, the Tokugawa shogunate has a knack for creating an elaborate surveillance system that would make Big Brother look like a nosy neighbor. The Sankinkari system requires daimyo, regional lords, to spend alternate years in Edo, a clever means of keeping potential rivals under the shogun's watchful eye. Their families remain in Edo as permanent hostages. Talk about an incentive to stay loyal. In this world, appearances are everything. The grandeur of Edo, from the majestic Edo castle to the meticulously maintained gardens, is a testament to the power and precision of the shogunate. But beneath the surface, the city is a cauldron of intrigue, where power struggles simmer and ambition sometimes outweighs loyalty. The samurai are the custodians of this delicate balance, the glue holding the complex mosaic of Edo society together. As you navigate these streets, remember that you are not just a warrior or an official. You are an embodiment of an entire era's ideals and contradictions. Your life is a constant dance between duty and desire, tradition and change. The legend of the samurai is one of honor and bravery, but behind the myth is a story of survival, of making do with what you have while aspiring to what you ought to be. It's a journey as intricate and unpredictable as the maze-like streets of Edo itself. And so, with each step, you weave through the tapestry of Edo, a living testament to the art of balance. In a world where honor is as fragile as the cherry blossoms that line the city's avenues, every action, every decision you make is a reflection of your commitment to the Bushido code. It's a life less about the sword and more about the subtle art of diplomacy, the delicate balance of power, and the eternal quest for harmony in a world that is anything but. The sun is now high, casting long shadows that dance across the streets of Edo, and your duties as a samurai call you to a different kind of battlefield, the training grounds. Forget the romanticized images of endless duels on misty mountains. Today you're off to practice with your fellow samurai, and it's less about glory and more about the grind. As you make your way to the dojo, let's talk about what's in your arsenal. Sure, the katana gets all the press, like the rock star of the samurai world, but your toolkit is more diverse than a sushi menu. Enter the yumi, the Japanese longbow, an elegant weapon that can launch arrows over 300 meters, about the length of 3 football fields stacked end to end. Then there's the yari, a spear that turns you into a human porcupine, perfect for keeping enemies at bay with its impressive reach. These aren't just accessories, they're essential tools in your martial repertoire, each with its own role in the theater of war. You arrive at the dojo, where the scent of sweat mingles with the sound of clashing weapons. Here, the air is thick with discipline, and each swing of the sword is a reminder of the muscle memory you're trying to embed deep in your bones. The training isn't glamorous. It's grueling, repetitive, and sometimes downright tedious. But hey, in a world where peace is the norm, you practice not for the certainty of battle, but for the possibility of it. Now, let's debunk a myth. The life of a samurai isn't all swordplay and swashbuckling. It's a careful balance of mind and body, a lifestyle that demands as much intellectual rigor as it does physical prowess. In fact, many samurai are as bookish as they are battle-ready. The Edo period isn't just about martial skill. It's a time when education holds immense value. You might find yourself delving into Confucian texts or practicing calligraphy, honing your mind with the same intensity you apply to your swordsmanship. Why the emphasis on education, you ask? It's more than just a pastime, it's a necessity. The Tokugawa shogunate, with its complex bureaucracy and rigid social order, requires samurai to be as adept with a brush as with a blade. You're expected to navigate the intricate web of politics and administration, a reality that makes a well-rounded education indispensable. In fact, samurai schools, or terrakoya, pop up across Edo, offering lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Think of them as the prep schools of feudal Japan, minus the exorbitant tuition fees. But don't mistake this focus on learning for a lack of martial spirit. The path of the samurai is one of balance, between the pen and the sword, the body and the mind. This duality is embodied in the concept of Bunbu Ryodo, the idea that the literary and the martial must coexist in harmony. It's a philosophy that shapes your every action, every decision, and it's what sets the samurai apart from mere warriors. As you train, you notice the camaraderie among your fellow samurai. Despite the rigid hierarchy, there's a sense of shared purpose, a recognition that you're all part of something larger. The dojo is a melting pot, where samurai from different regions and backgrounds come together to hone their skills. It's a place where respect is earned through sweat and discipline, not just lineage. So what's the upside to all this hard work? Well, for one, it keeps you in top physical condition. And let's be honest, in a world where your social standing can literally be cut down to size, it's good to know you can handle yourself in a scuffle. Plus, there's the undeniable satisfaction of mastering a skill, the thrill of perfecting a technique. It's not just about preparing for battle, it's about personal growth, about cultivating a sense of inner strength and resilience. As the sun begins its descent, casting golden hues across the training grounds, you take a moment to reflect. The life of a samurai is a constant balancing act, a dance between tradition and change, duty and desire. It's a world of contradictions, where the romantic ideals of honor and bravery are tempered by the harsh realities of daily life. But that's what makes it so fascinating, isn't it? The samurai are more than just warriors. They are philosophers, scholars, and statesmen, navigating a world as complex and unpredictable as the tides. And so, as you pack up your gear and prepare to leave the dojo, you carry with you the lessons of the day. The path of the samurai is one of perpetual learning, of striving for excellence in all things. It's a journey that never truly ends, and that's exactly what keeps it so engaging. As you head back into the bustling streets of Edo, you can't help but feel a sense of pride, a recognition that you're part of something timeless and enduring. The sun dips lower, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, and you make your way home, ready to face whatever the evening might bring. The day is far from over, and who knows what challenges or opportunities await. In the world of the samurai, one thing is certain. The journey is as important as the destination, and with each step, you embrace the intricate dance of history, weaving your own story into the rich tapestry of Edo, Japan. As you step back onto the bustling streets of Edo, sun's farewell glow gives way to the intricate dance of your afternoon obligations. Forget about cozying up with a cup of matcha and a haiku. It's time to navigate the social labyrinth that is samurai society. Welcome to the world of afternoon tea, samurai style, where the stakes are higher than your average caffeine rush. Here, the brew is flavored with a hefty dose of etiquette, hierarchy, and a dash of political intrigue. Now, let's talk about the social pyramid you're climbing. At the top sits the shogun, the big kahuna in a sea of lesser lords and landowners. Below him are the daimyo, the feudal lords who are part landlord, part military commander. As a samurai, you're somewhere in this mix, a cog in the elaborate machinery of the Tokugawa shogunate. Your role: keep the gears turning smoothly while ensuring you don't become a casualty of internal politics. It's a bit like playing chess, except the pieces are people, and a wrong move can have you checkmated into oblivion. Speaking of hierarchy, let's dive into the samurai family structure, a microcosm of the larger societal order. The samurai household isn't just a home, it's a political unit, a mini-kingdom where loyalty and obedience are as compulsory as your daily bowl of rice. The head of the family, often the eldest male, holds the reins of power, while everyone else jockeys for favor and security. Like Game of Thrones, but with more swords and fewer dragons. Within this framework, the expectations of honor and duty loom large. You're not just living for yourself. Your every action reflects on your family, your clan, and by extension, your lord. A misstep isn't just a personal faux pas. It's a stain that can tarnish your entire lineage. The pressure to uphold the family's honor can be as suffocating as your armor on a hot summer's day. Honor is your guiding star, but let's not romanticize it too much. The concept of honor is as much about survival as it is about virtue. In this world, honor is currency, a form of social capital that can be as volatile as the stock market. Lose it, and you're in for a world of hurt, disgrace, poverty, or even the dreaded seppuku, a ritual suicide that's about as appealing as a vacation in a volcano. Now, let's debunk another myth, that samurai life is all about personal glory. The reality is a bit more mundane. It's less about individual heroics and more about collective responsibility. You're part of a larger tapestry, where personal ambition must be carefully balanced with the needs of your clan. A samurai's life is a constant negotiation between personal desires and the greater good, a dance as intricate as any tea ceremony. Speaking of tea, let's dive into the social duties that accompany this ritual. Tea gatherings, known as chanoi, are more than just an excuse to sip matcha and chat. They're a critical arena for networking, a chance to solidify alliances and gauge the political climate. These gatherings are steeped in ritual, with every gesture and phrase carrying meaning. It's like a high-stakes poker game where the chips are your reputation and future prospects. But don't let the serene setting fool you. These gatherings are as much about politics as they are about pleasure. The tea room is a microcosm of the samurai world, where alliances are forged, rivalries simmer, and subtle power plays unfold. You're not just drinking tea, you're navigating a delicate web of relationships, where a misplaced word can tip the balance. And let's not forget the role of women in this equation. In samurai society, women are often the unsung diplomats, wielding influence behind the scenes. They're the ones who manage the household, arrange marriages, and sometimes even act as advisors. It's a world where the personal is political, and every social interaction is a potential chess move. As you sip your tea and engage in the requisite small talk, you're also taking the temperature of the room, assessing who's in favor and who might be on the outs. It's a delicate dance, a performance where you're constantly gauging reactions and adjusting your strategy. After all, in the world of samurai politics, information is power, and a well-timed insight can be as valuable as a sharp blade. But let's not sugarcoat it. This isn't a world of endless opportunity. The rigid class system is as confining as a suit of armor, with less room for upward mobility than a sardine tin. You're born into your station, and while there's some wiggle room, the ceiling is often made of stone. Yet, within these constraints, the samurai find ways to maneuver, leveraging alliances and honing skills to carve out a niche in a world that's as competitive as it is hierarchical. So, what's the takeaway from this afternoon of social maneuvering? It's that the life of a samurai is as much about navigating the shifting sands of politics as it is about mastering the blade. It's a world where honor and duty are intertwined with ambition and intrigue, where the path to success is as convoluted as a Zen koan. As the tea gathering draws to a close, you bow politely, your mind a whirl of strategies and possibilities. You've played your part in the day's social theater, but the curtain has yet to fall. There are still alliances to forge, rivalries to navigate, and the ever-present dance of power to contend with. The sun may be setting, but the drama of samurai life is far from over. As you step back into the streets of Edo, you carry with you the weight of history and the promise of what's yet to come. The journey continues, and the story is far from finished. As you step back into the streets of Edo, the sun sinks behind the horizon, painting the city in twilight hues. Evening settles in like a comfortable, if slightly worn, kimono. The bustling energy of the day transforms into a quieter, more introspective mood, a perfect backdrop for reflection. It's time to weigh the romanticized vision of the samurai against the daily grind you've just navigated. Let's face it, the image Hollywood sells of the samurai is as glossy as a lacquered teacup. Noble warriors, swords gleaming in the sunlight, fighting for honor and glory. But here's the kicker. What's often missing from the picture is the endless paperwork, the rice counting, and the daily political tap dance. The real life of a samurai is less about dramatic battles and more about the relentless march of duty and responsibility. Sure, the katana is a work of art, a lethal masterpiece forged with craftsmanship that rivals any Renaissance painting. But for every hour spent perfecting your swordplay, there are countless more spent in the mundane duties of administration and social navigation. The truth is, the samurai's world was more about wielding influence than wielding swords. The Tokugawa era, lasting from 1603 to 1868, was largely peaceful, thanks to the shogunate's iron grip. This meant that many samurai traded the battlefield for a desk, their lives governed by the ebb and flow of politics and economics rather than the clash of steel. The reality behind the romantic veneer is that the samurai class was a cog in a vast machine, with about 2 million samurai in Japan by the late Edo period. They made up roughly 6-7% of the population. They were expected to uphold the social order. The shogunate's policies kept them in check, with strict laws dictating everything from hairstyle to weapon ownership. They were both privileged and constrained, a paradox that defined their existence. And let's talk about the Bushido Code, the much-vaunted way of the warrior. It's often presented as a chivalric code akin to that of medieval knights, yet in practice, it was more a collection of ideals than a set of rigid rules. Sure, it emphasized loyalty, courage, and honor, but it also included a heavy dose of pragmatism. With a stipend often paid in rice, a samurai's loyalty could be as much about ensuring a steady supply of food as it was about lofty ideals. As the moon rises, casting a silver glow over Edo, the legacy of the samurai begins to unfold. Their influence echoes beyond the confines of their era, shaping Japan's cultural and historical identity. The Meiji Restoration in 1868 saw the end of the samurai's traditional role, as Japan rapidly modernized and feudalism gave way to a more centralized government. But the samurai spirit didn't vanish. It evolved, finding new life in Japan's military ethos and corporate culture. In modern times, the image of the samurai has taken on a mythic quality, a symbol of discipline and honor that transcends borders. From Kurosawa films to anime and video games, the samurai has become a global icon, a shorthand for an idealized past. Yet, it's crucial to remember that these portrayals often gloss over the complexities and contradictions of samurai life. The enduring myths of the lone warrior, the noble death, and the unwavering loyalty are compelling, but they are only part of the story. The samurai were human, with all the flaws and contradictions that entails. They navigated a world of shifting alliances and political intrigue, their lives a balancing act between personal ambition and the demands of duty. So, what does this all teach us? Understanding history means embracing its complexity, recognizing that legends are often built on the backs of real people leading real lives. The samurai were not just characters in a grand narrative. They were individuals shaped by their time, grappling with the same struggles and aspirations that define us today. As you walk through the quiet streets of Edo, the city a mosaic of light and shadow, you carry with you the lessons of the samurai. Their story is one of resilience and adaptation, a testament to the enduring power of tradition in the face of change. And as you reflect on their legacy, remember that history is not a simple tale of heroes and villains. It's a rich tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of truth and myth, honor and compromise. The night deepens, and with it comes a sense of closure. The journey through the world of the samurai has been as enlightening as it has been unexpected. You've seen beyond the myths, glimpsed the reality behind the romance, and in doing so, gained a deeper appreciation for the intricate dance of history. The story of the samurai is far from over, and as you turn towards home, you know that it will continue to inspire, challenge, and captivate for generations to come. In the grand game of European matchmaking, the 16th century was a lot like a medieval version of The Bachelor, just with a few more axes and a lot less reality TV. Anne of Cleves, a young woman from the Duchy of Cleves, found herself smack dab in this royal reality show when she became the fourth wife of England's notorious King Henry Roman VIII. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before Anne was sizing up English crowns and dodging Tudor drama, she was just a noblewoman from a small German territory trying to navigate the choppy waters of dynastic politics. Anne was born in 1515 to John Roman III, Duke of Cleves, and Maria of Jülichburg, in what is now modern-day Germany. Her background might not scream future queen, but it was all about who you knew, or who wanted to know you. Cleves might not have been the largest or most powerful duchy around, but it was strategically nestled in the Holy Roman Empire. That made it a prime piece on the European chessboard of alliances and marriages. Henry Roman VIII, always on the lookout for the next missus. Tudor, to solve his political puzzles, had his eyes peeled for a German alliance. Enter Anne, stage right. Now, if you think dating apps have some questionable profiles, the 16th century had its own version of catfish. This wasn't about swiping right, but rather sending an artist across the continent to capture your future spouse's likeness. Enter Hans, Holbein the Younger, the Tinder of Tudor England. Holbein was dispatched to Cleves to paint Anne's portrait, a task that was both an art and a high-stakes political maneuver. The result was a depiction that showed Anne as an attractive prospect for Henry, though whether Holbein had a knack for Photoshop-level flattery is a matter of historical debate. In the world of royal matchmaking, appearances mattered, but not just in the literal sense. The portrait was a diplomatic document, a visual contract promising beauty and virtue, or at least what passed for them. Holbein's portrait did its job. Henry was smitten, at least on parchment. But portraits don't convey personality, and they definitely don't include a "what you see is what you get" disclaimer. It's like reading a book by its cover, only to find the pages are written in a language you don't understand. But why the rush for Henry to tie the knot again? Picture England in the late 1530s. Henry had already churned through 3 marriages, Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour, and was in desperate need of a male heir and political stability. After Jane's death in 1537, Henry was a single Pringle, and European politics were as tangled as a ball of yarn after a cat's been at it. France and the Holy Roman Empire were cozying up, and Henry needed an ally fast. Marrying Anne would link England to the Protestant territories of Germany, a nifty counterbalance to the Catholic power blocks. By the time Holbein's painting landed back in England, it was 1539, and Henry was ready to seal the deal. However, the first meeting between Anne and Henry in January 1540 was less love at first sight and more awkward blind date. Imagine Henry expecting the woman from the portrait and instead meeting a real 3-dimensional person who, according to him, bore little resemblance to the painting. In a less than chivalrous move, Henry reportedly called Anne a Flanders mare. Not exactly sweet talk. Anne was whisked away into the tumultuous world of the English court, where politics were more cutthroat than any boardroom drama. Despite the less than romantic beginnings, the marriage went ahead on January 6, 1540. But the union was as shaky as a Tudor dining table with one leg shorter than the others. Within 6 months, the marriage was annulled, siding Anne's pre-contract with Francis of Lorraine, a detail conveniently overlooked when Henry was in full wooing mode. Despite the short-lived nature of her queenship, Anne came out of the marriage relatively unscathed by Tudor standards. She was given a generous settlement, including Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, and was granted the honorary title of the king's beloved sister. Her life post-Henry was far more peaceful than one might expect for a woman who tangled with the Tudors. Anne lived comfortably in England, enjoying a life free from the guillotine's shadow that had loomed over some of her predecessors. In the end, Anne of Cleves might not have been the Queen Henry dreamed of, but she played her part in the grand narrative of Tudor history. Her story is a delightful cocktail of art, politics, and the absurdity of royal matchmaking. It serves as a reminder that even in the 16th century, you couldn't always judge a book or a bride by its cover. So next time you're swiping through profiles, just think of Anne and remember, sometimes the picture doesn't tell the whole story. Anne of Cleves' story might start like a royal love letter, but it quickly turns into a comedy of errors worthy of a Shakespearean play. When Henry Roman VIII finally laid eyes on his bride-to-be, it was less a grand unveiling and more like a big-budget movie trailer that promised action but delivered a rom-com. The great unveiling took place on New Year's Day, 1540, at Rochester, and boy, was it a showstopper, for all the wrong reasons. Henry, ever the romantic, decided to surprise Anne by arriving unannounced, possibly thinking he could sweep her off her feet like a knight in shining armor. But this wasn't a fairy tale. It was more like an episode of what not to expect when you're expecting. When Henry met Anne, he reportedly found her appearance shockingly different from Holbein's flattering portrayal. This isn't to say Anne was unattractive. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, after all. But Henry's expectations were sky-high, like, touch the moon high, and reality was a rude awakening. Henry's infamous quip, describing Anne as a Flanders mare, stuck like an unwelcome barnacle. Whether this was a case of Henry's personal taste or a diplomatic gaffe is a matter of debate, but the label has lingered through the centuries. This first meeting wasn't just a personal faux pas, it was a diplomatic disaster. The stakes were higher than a Tudor banquet's calorie count. England was trying to woo the Protestant League in Germany, using Anne as a sort of matrimonial peace treaty. The marriage was supposed to be a bridge between England and the Protestant princes of Germany, a counterbalance to the Catholic powers of France and the Holy Roman Emperor. But instead, it became a punchline in the history of failed alliances. Now, let's talk economics. The cost of royal weddings back then was enough to make even the most extravagant modern wedding look like a budget elopement. The marriage treaty with Anne included a dowry of 100,000 gold florins, roughly equivalent to around £400,000 in today's money. That's a lot of coin for a union that lasted less than the time it takes to bake a good fruitcake. But Henry wasn't just investing in a bride. He was buying political leverage. Or at least, that's what he hoped. The political and social stakes were enormous. England was a Protestant island in a Catholic sea, and Henry needed all the friends he could get. But when the marriage started on such shaky ground, it was like trying to build a castle on quicksand. The English court was abuzz with whispers and raised eyebrows, and the European courts were no different. The unveiling of Anne was seen as a flop, and Henry's disappointment was both a personal letdown and a political gut punch. Anne, for her part, was thrust into a world as foreign as it was fickle. The English court was a snake pit disguised as a garden party, and Anne had to navigate its treacherous waters without a map. Despite her outsider status, Anne managed to win the hearts of the English people with her gentle demeanor and adaptability. But winning over Henry was a different ball game, one she was never quite allowed to play. The marriage was officially annulled on July 9, 1540, just 6 months after the wedding. The reason given was a pre-contract between Anne and Francis of Lorraine, though this was less a deal-breaker and more a convenient loophole. In reality, the marriage's demise was a reflection of Henry's whims and the political machinations of his court. Anne, however, emerged from the debacle with dignity and a pretty sweet settlement. She was granted a generous allowance and several properties, including Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, becoming one of the wealthiest women in England. Henry's disappointment might have been a personal embarrassment, but it also reflected the precarious nature of royal marriages in the 16th century. These unions were less about love and more about power plays, treaty-making, and political chess. The Anne-Henry saga was a reminder that even the best-laid plans of kings and courtiers could unravel faster than a Tudor ruff in a rainstorm. Anne's story doesn't end with her annulment. She became known as the king's beloved sister, a title that ensured her a place of honor at court. She outlived Henry and several of his other wives, proving that sometimes the biggest winners are those who walk away from the table with their heads still attached. While Anne might not have been the Queen Henry envisioned, she played her role with grace and humor, leaving an indelible mark on Tudor history. Her tale is a masterclass in turning lemons into lemonade, or perhaps, considering the era, ale. Anne of Cleves might have left the Tudor matrimonial merry-go-round with her head intact, and a castle or two to boot, but her story didn't end with a royal Dear John letter. In fact, her brief stint as Queen of England was shorter than a season finale cliffhanger, yet it left a mark that even the most dramatic court intrigue couldn't erase. With a tenure as queen that barely had time to make it into the Tudor family scrapbook, Anne's reign was a flash in the pan, but what a flash it was. Now, let's talk about annulments versus divorces in Tudor England, a topic as juicy as a court banquet's main course. When your marriage lasts less time than it takes to binge a decent Netflix series, you start to wonder why Henry Roman VIII didn't just opt for a quickie divorce. But in the 16th century, annulment was the royal get-out-of-jail-free card, providing a loophole that made a clean break from marital mishaps possible without the messy business of a full-blown divorce. Divorce carried a social stigma that even Henry, with his penchant for charping and changing wives, found hard to stomach. An annulment, however, was a different beast entirely, often justified by dubious claims like non-consummation or pre-existing contracts, which were about as believable as a Tudor alchemist promising to turn lead into gold. The cost of these legal gymnastics, let's just say it wasn't cheap. The annulment of Anne and Henry's marriage might have spared Henry some public embarrassment, but it also came with a princely price tag. Legal fees, settlements, and the inevitable diplomatic fallout were the hidden costs of Henry's whims, far surpassing the budget of most modern divorces, minus the lawyers with a penchant for Tudor fashion. Anne, meanwhile, navigated her post-divorce life with a savvy that would put a modern-day financial advisor to shame. Granted the title of the king's beloved sister, Anne secured her place in the Tudor court with a dignity that belied her short-lived queenship. And let's not forget that generous settlement, Richmond Palace, Hever Castle, and an annual allowance of £4,000, a figure that would have any contemporary financial planner nodding in approval. Her life after Henry was a lesson in turning a royal rejection into a golden opportunity. Anne managed to live comfortably and independently, a rare feat for a woman in Tudor England, where independence for women was often as mythical as unicorns and dragons. She maintained cordial relations with Henry's children, particularly Elizabeth. and was often seen at court events, occupying a unique position that was neither quite queen nor commoner. While Anne's marriage to Henry was a brief chapter in her life, her ability to adapt and thrive in its aftermath speaks volumes about her character. She may not have been the apple of Henry's eye, but she certainly knew how to play the long game, proving that sometimes the best way to win at the Tudor court was simply to survive it. Her story, filled with both romance and reality, challenges the notion that queenship was the ultimate prize. Instead, Anne showed that sometimes stepping off the throne was the best way to keep one's head, both literally and figuratively. In the end, Anne's experience wasn't just a personal saga, but a reflection of the broader socio-political dynamics of the period. Her annulment underscored the precarious nature of political alliances, which were as stable as a Tudor trifle in a heatwave. The quick unraveling of her marriage to Henry highlighted the volatile mix of personal desires and political expediencies that defined royal unions. It was a time when the stakes weren't just personal but national, where the fate of kingdoms could hinge on a single marriage contract or the whims of a capricious king. Anne's post-marital life, free from the constraints of being queen, allowed her a freedom that few of Henry's wives ever enjoyed. She became a popular figure in England, beloved by the people and respected at court, living a life that was both independent and secure. Her financial acumen, combined with her ability to navigate the tricky waters of Tudor politics, made her one of the most successful of Henry's wives in terms of longevity and legacy. Her story is a testament to the idea that while the crown may glitter, it's often the quieter victories that shine the brightest. Anne's ability to transform a potentially devastating personal defeat into a life of relative peace and prosperity illustrates the power of resilience and resourcefulness. It's a reminder that in the grand tapestry of history, even the briefest of reigns can leave a lasting impact. As Anne of Cleves settled into her new life, the court moved on, with Henry's eyes already set on his next matrimonial adventure. Yet Anne's saga didn't end with her annulment. Her role in the Tudor narrative was far from over. She continued to be a presence in the court, a living reminder of the complexities and contradictions of royal life. Her story serves as a fascinating counterpoint to the more dramatic tales of Henry's other wives, offering a glimpse into the quieter, yet equally compelling, corners of history. In the chaotic world of Tudor England, where fortunes could change as quickly as the tides on the Thames, Anne of Cleves carved out a niche for herself that was both unique and enduring. Her life post-queenship was a testament to her strength and adaptability, qualities that ensured her a place in the annals of history, not as a footnote, but as a figure of resilience and wisdom. So, while her reign may have been short-lived, her legacy continues to endure, reminding us that sometimes the best stories are those that unfold away from the spotlight. Anne of Cleves' post-Queen era was like a masterclass in turning lemons into lemonade, or perhaps more accurately, turning a royal flop into a financial win. No longer the focal point of Henry's ever-evolving matrimonial carousel, Anne managed to carve out a niche for herself that many a Tudor courtier would envy. Her honorary title, King's beloved sister, wasn't just a gilded consolation prize. It was a strategic coup, giving her a unique standing at court without the drama of marital obligations or the looming threat of Henry's infamous sword. You see, in a world where women were often treated as political pawns, Anne played the game with the finesse of a chess grandmaster. Her annuity, a hefty £4,000 a year, equivalent to over £1 million today, wasn't just pocket money. It was her ticket to independence. She wisely invested in properties like Richmond Palace and Hever Castle, ensuring a lifestyle that was both comfortable and secure. In a society where women's financial autonomy was about as common as a snowstorm in July, Anne's economic savvy was nothing short of revolutionary. But Anne's knack for navigating Tudor society wasn't just about the money. She had the social skills to match her economic acumen, managing to endear herself to the English people and court alike. While the rest of Henry's wives were often embroiled in scandals that kept the court gossip mill grinding, Anne was the eye of the storm, a calm and steady presence. Her genuine friendship with Henry post-annulment was a plot twist worthy of a historical novel. Imagine maintaining a cordial relationship with an ex who not only annulled your marriage, but also had a history of less-than-friendly breakups with his wives. It's like staying friends with someone who ghosted you after a first date, except the stakes were significantly higher, and the ghosting involved more than just unread messages. Anne's unexpected popularity was the stuff of legend, a testament to her charm and adaptability in a court that thrived on intrigue and backstabbing. She was a frequent guest at court events, a fixture in the Tudor social scene, without the burden of political maneuvering that came with being queen. It's as if Anne found the loophole in the Tudor court's unwritten rules. Be present, be pleasant, and be politically neutral. While Henry's other wives were often embroiled in the deadly dance of court politics, Anne was living her best life on the sidelines, enjoying the perks of royalty without its pitfalls. The genuine friendship she forged with Henry after their annulment was one of those historical oddities that defy modern logic. But it worked for both of them. Henry got a trusted confidante who posed no political threat, and Anne enjoyed the protection and privileges that came with her unique status. It was a rare win-win in a time when alliances were as stable as a house of cards in a windstorm. And let's not forget the broader socio-political context. Anne's position as King's beloved sister was more than just a title. It was a strategic buffer in the ever-turbulent European political landscape. By maintaining a friendly relationship with Anne, Henry kept a diplomatic channel open with the Protestant territories of Germany, a useful counterbalance to the Catholic powers that surrounded England like a pack of hungry wolves. In the end, Anne's life after the crown was a testament to her resilience and resourcefulness. She might not have been the Queen Henry dreamed of, but she was the strategist who played the long game and won. While her marriage to Henry was a brief and somewhat comical episode in the annals of history, her ability to thrive afterward was nothing short of remarkable. Anne of Cleves proved that sometimes the best way to win at the Tudor court was not to play the game at all, but to rewrite the rules entirely. And so, Anne of Cleves stands as a testament to the power of dodging a royal bullet and living to tell the tale. In the cutthroat world of Tudor politics, where the stakes were as high as Henry Roman VIII cholesterol, Anne's ability to walk away from the wreckage of her marriage with her head and her castles intact was nothing short of miraculous. But let's not sugarcoat it. Her story wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving in a landscape where others lost more than just their crowns. Anne's legacy is a fascinating paradox. On the one hand, she's the queen who wasn't really a queen, a historical footnote in the grand drama of Henry's 6 marriages. But on the other, she's a symbol of resilience and savvy, qualities that were as rare in the Tudor court as a vegetarian feast. The tale of Anne of Cleves challenges the notion that royal success was all about crowns and consorts. Sometimes, the biggest victory was simply getting out alive. Let's debunk a few myths while we're at it. One persistent legend claims that Anne didn't understand English customs and was repulsed by Henry at first sight. While it's true that cultural differences existed, Anne reportedly had to learn English customs on the job. There's no concrete evidence that she found Henry distasteful. In fact, Anne's adaptability was one of her strongest suits. She might have been surprised to find herself in a foreign court with a king who was more interested in chess pieces than in her, but she adapted, learning the Tudor game with the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. Then there's the myth that Anne lived out her days in sorrowful exile, a forgotten relic of Henry's matrimonial misadventures. The reality, as is often the case, was more nuanced and, frankly, more interesting. Anne's life post-annulment was anything but a lonely exile. She remained a respected figure at court, living comfortably on her substantial income, more than many of Henry's other wives could claim. And let's face it, those castles didn't clean themselves. They were the spoils of a savvy, albeit short-lived, alliance. Economically, Anne's settlement was a masterstroke. Her annual allowance of £4,000, which would be over £1 million today, was a fortune that allowed her to wield economic power that few women of her time could even imagine. It's a testament to her shrewdness and the careful negotiations that followed her annulment. She wasn't just a pawn in Henry's game. She was a player who knew how to secure a win, even if it wasn't the one originally planned. Politically, Anne's position as the king's beloved sister was a stroke of genius. In a court where allegiances shifted like the sands of the Thames, her status allowed her to maintain influence without the burden of political entanglement. She was a bridge between the English court and the Protestant territories of her homeland, a diplomatic channel that Henry was wise to keep open. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful players are those who operate behind the scenes, away from the glare of the throne. But perhaps Anne's most enduring legacy is her ability to navigate a world that was as unpredictable as a Tudor feast. Her story is a reminder that success isn't always about the crown. Sometimes it's about stepping back and letting others play the dangerous game of thrones. In a time when women were often seen as mere extensions of their husbands, Anne carved out a niche for herself that was both independent and influential. Her life was a masterclass in resilience and wit, a story that shows that even in the harshest of environments, it's possible to emerge with not only your life intact, but with a legacy that endures. Anne of Cleves might not have been the Queen Henry envisioned, but she was the one who played the Tudor game and came out a winner. Her tale is a rich tapestry of political intrigue, economic savvy, and personal strength, woven together in a way that still resonates today. So, while Anne's reign as queen was brief, her impact was anything but. Her story stands as a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of playing the long game. In the end, Anne of Cleves shows us that sometimes the best way to win is not to play the game at all, but to rewrite the rules and redefine what it means to be successful in a world where the odds are stacked against you. And that, dear listeners, is a legacy worth celebrating.